The Chairman's Chaplain and the Managing Director.
Please remain standing for prayers.
Good evening, councillors. Good evening, members of the public. Shall we pray? Father, in the midst of this evening, help us to always be mindful of actually friends, family and communities that are struggling. Particularly mindful of communities and businesses devastated by the recent floods. Father, help us to be mindful of their needs. Yet, Lord, in our midst tonight, we pray also that you would guide us by your Holy Spirit. Gracious Lord, you would give us wisdom in all that is discussed and debated. Father, you give us mutual respect of one another's views and opinions as shared this evening. And Lord, in all that is said, all that is shared, you would be honoured in our midst. We ask all these things in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you.
Please be seated. Welcome, members, officers and members of the public to this meeting on the 18th of February 2020. It's good to see so many members of the public in attendance tonight, but can I remind them that although you are all very welcome at this meeting, you are not permitted to speak at the meeting. I would ask you to respect this and allow councillors to hear all of the points that are being made. Members, we have a heavy agenda this evening, and I would also, and a lot of residents in attendance for the two petitions. I would therefore like to move a motion without notice, 14C, as set out on page 410 of the Constitution, in order to ensure that we manage to get through the statutory reports on the agenda. For example, the council tax, setting report to change the agenda, running order as follows. Items 1 to 5 are set out on the agenda. Then items 13 through to 16 in numerical order. And then items 6 through to 12 in numerical order. I need a seconder. Can you second it?
Yeah, you need to make the motion.
I have made the motion.
Right, and I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you very much. I shall now take item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence.
Chairman, thank you. Councillor Bob Milne has given his apologies in the office today.
Are there any other apologies, members? No? Thank you very much. I shall now take item 2 on the agenda, minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of February 2020. Okay. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Not an error as such, but there is an item of omission. On page 5, 4th paragraph, the vote was taken on a show of hands is correct, but we asked for a count of which is 1518, and we asked for that to be noted, and it hasn't been noted, so I would ask that to be added to the minutes. Secondly, and this is a small point, it's on the recommendations we had 12 votes taken. On 4 of those, the numbers of votes do not add up to the numbers of members present, and I would ask that in future, I realise we can't go back retrospectively on this, but in future there is care taken to make sure that the number of votes cast do match up to the number of members voting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Mason. Okay. I've been told, Councillor Mrs Mason, that the numbers don't necessarily add up because some councillors did not vote on some of the items.
Thank you. If that's the case, Mr Chairman, we have abstentions, we have 4 and we have against. So if we have, what do we have? I don't know. We need to have another category so that it does add up. Thank you. Not voting.
Councillor Mrs Mason, it's not required in the Constitution, but I note your comments. Thank you. Agenda item 3, members. Declarations of interest. Do members have any interest to declare? No? Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, announcements from the chairman, leader or head of paid service. There are no announcements from the leader of the head of paid service, members, but I would like to remind you, members, of my civic dinner to be held on the 6th of March 2020 and my charity quiz night to be held on the 20th of March 2020. It would be nice to see as many of you there as possible, and possibly some members of the public perhaps. Thank you. Agenda item 5, presentation of petitions pursuant to Rule 11. Members, we have 2 petitions to be presented this evening. The first petition will be presented by Mr. David Miles, who will have a total of 5 minutes to present it. After that, members, we have a total of 15 minutes in which to debate the petition. Just 15 minutes. I will ask the portfolio holder for planning to respond to the petition in the first instance, and then we'll invite other members to contribute to the debate. As we only have 15 minutes in total, and I want as many members as possible to have an opportunity to speak, can I please ask you to be as concise and as brief as possible? Mr. Miles, you will have the opportunity at the end of the debate to sum up for a maximum of 1 minute if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As many people know, there is widespread outrage from residents. Sorry. As many people know, there is widespread outrage from residents throughout the district that the core strategy that has led to understandable overdevelopment. The local infrastructure, and especially highways, is not coping with the development completed so far, let alone those sites for which planning is due to be submitted before 2025. The Council intends for the core strategy to be simply taken forward, unchanged, into a new local plan 2017 to 2037. The Council does not expect the new local plan to be adopted until 2023 at the earliest. The date, 12 years after the adoption of the core strategy, certainly does not fulfil the legal requirement for an early review, as was legally required by Planning Inspector Laura Graham. The CEO Planning Inspectorate lawfully required that RDC do an early review of the local plan. This was not done. Had the Council undertaken such a review, then the findings of ACOM would also have been taken into account. That's the Growth and Infrastructure Framework for Rochford District. Now, just diverging slightly, you know, as residents, we have certain lawful duties to pay our council tax, not to fly tip, not to park illegally, and likewise we expect the people that represent us on the council to act the same within the legal framework that's established. You know, if you have a society where you pick and choose, cherry pick even, or pick and choose which parts of the legal system you want to adhere to, then, you know, it becomes a pretty poor system where we just say, oh no, we don't want to do this bit, but we do that bit. Anyway, carrying on, the council would, you know, then have had to have reconsidered the sustainability of the core strategy. Since the early review of the core strategy has not been undertaken and has been unilaterally ignored by the council, this has led to planning decisions being made which are detrimental to residents and will be exacerbated if the SRER 8 is approved in a planning application. If Rochford District Council do not appear to have confidence in the legal requirements placed upon them, how can constituents reasonably be expected to have confidence in them and their decision making? This has led to the vote of no confidence petition in Rochford District Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. Councillor Ward, can I please ask you to respond to the petition? Councillor Ward, you have 5 minutes in which to respond.
Thank you, Chairman. The key point of concern raised in the petition is that a review of the core strategy has not been carried out by the Council, together with insufficient investment in infrastructure, unsustainable overdevelopment and material economic damage. Firstly, a question. Why was there a commitment to carry out an early review of the core strategy? I'll explain. The core strategy itself was adopted in 2011 and an early review took place in March 2012 in response to the Inspector's letter of August 2011, which I quote some salient points. In all circumstances and to avoid any further delay, I am minded to suggest that the Council considers proposing changes to the plan which would acknowledge the shortfall in the planned period, briefly explaining the circumstances and making a firm commitment to an early review of the plan. I am of the view that such changes could be considered minor and would not require formal consultation or sustainability assessment. And I continue. This course of action would be a pragmatic way of ensuring that the Council has a core strategy in place to guide development whilst it undertakes a revision of the plan in accordance with the new legislative and policy framework. In regard to the allocations plan, it was not finally adopted until 2014. Both the core strategy and the allocations plan were publicly examined and tested by an independent inspector, and both were found to be sound and suitable for adoption. The soundness of the plans was further tested through legal challenges, but no issues were subsequently identified regarding the way the plans had been prepared by the Council. There is a specific reason for the recommendation by the Inspector for an early review of the core strategy, and this did not relate to any shortcomings in the contents or soundness of the plan. Progress of the plan through public examination to adoption was delayed as a result of the imminent arrival of a new national planning policy framework and at the same time the proposed revocation of regional plans. The delay meant the core strategy as submitted technically did not cover a 15-year period. The Inspector, as explained, raised no issues with the soundness of the plan, but did accept the benefits of an early review to ensure the plan covered at least a 15-year period. This early review of the core strategy commenced March in 2012, and its outcomes are a matter of record. The core strategy and the allocations plan and other policy documents form the planning framework for the district to be implemented by 2025. For the plans to be sound, every site allocation, that's housing, employment, etc., was tested to ensure it could be sustainably delivered, and the specific infrastructure requirements for every housing site are set out in Appendix H1 of the adopted core strategy, and in the individual site policies set out in the allocation plan. For planning consent to be granted for development on the allocated sites, the developer must agree to provide all the infrastructure requested in order to fully mitigate the impact of their development. The Council is currently working on the preparation of a new local plan. It's worth noting that the new local plan will effectively compromise the contents of a core strategy and an allocations plan. The petitioner makes a point about material economic damage, though it should be recognised
Councillor
that
Ward, you have 1
development
minute.
plans are intended to address a range of social, economic and environmental matters. The current core strategy and allocation plans also include proposals for economic development, and the area action plan prepared jointly with Southend Borough Council provide for the development of the airport and a new business park. Far from creating material economic damage as suggested, the Council's plans are focused on economic regeneration and development, with housing as an essential part of that equation. Because of the reasons previously stated, and we currently have embarked on our new local plan, I propose no further action. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I second that proposition, and I reserve the right to speak at the end of the debate if necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. I have a number of people wishing to speak. Councillor Mrs Mason. Could I ask all speakers to be concise, please?
I will do my best, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for calling me. In December 2011, this council adopted the core strategy and, in line with the inspector's requirement, committed to an early review. The council did not do that, in my view, in a timely fashion, and it is regularly reporting that it cannot progress the agreed dates on the new local plan 2017 to 2037. We are 3 years past that date, you will note. If the council had acted promptly on the earlier review, this would have enabled residents to have certainty and prevented all the current upset and stress caused to residents because a possible extension of the core strategy could have been undertaken alongside known infrastructure deficits. The problem with inadequate infrastructure and doubts as to the sustainability of current and future development in our area is not only documented but experienced by all of us on a regular basis. Therefore, it is no surprise, though of great regret, that so many residents have supported a vote of no confidence, and this whole matter needs to be reviewed urgently by the council. Initially, I would think at the review committee, and then with the planning inspector, whose directions need to be taken into account, because this council has failed to conduct a timely review that was committed in 2011. This council has failed to provide adequate resources to ensure that this was conducted and that the new local plan is carried out efficiently in a timely fashion. In brief, in my view, this council has spectacularly failed its residents in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Mason. Councillor Mrs Macpherson.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry,
Okay.
I haven't got a mic, but I'm usually quite loud enough anyway.
Councillor, bear with me. I need to repeat your name. It's Councillor Mrs Macpherson. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Macpherson, could you please use the mic, because we have audio recording upstairs for the benefit of residents
It is on.
upstairs. It's on. So if you
There
could
is someone-
speak
not one
into
here,
the
so I'll
if you
move
can
into
speak
there.
into the mic, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank Councillor Ward for his account. His role as councillor with the portfolio for planning is not a position that I will ever see a queue for. It is a painful, thankless task, with housing numbers pushed onto local councils from successive governments. So to recap, the then head of planning produced a report that led the development subcommittee to choose option E. The fuller review then started on 2015 as part of the new local plan. The problem is this is not seen as good enough by our residents, and I empathise completely with our residents. Our residents must be listened to and their concerns addressed. The allocations plan was adopted in 2014. This is 6 years ago. It is important that we don't just roll over existing policies in our new plan. We must review our spatial strategy and policies in the light of up-to-date evidence and guidance. For example, the impact of developments on climate change, the environment have currently reviewed their flood management plans for 2021 to 2027. Within the revision that Councillor Ward has mentioned, I am hoping that all new guidance and emerging evidence will be included and their impact on any allocations, past and present, are considered. Then, finally, there is the elephant in the room. Essex County Council highways. I do not have long enough to say what I would like to say about Essex County highways, but I would like to see our county councillors as a collective challenge highways decisions. I know our county councillors, and trust me, they can be quite formidable on their own. I hope post this meeting my suggestion will be acted upon, not as lip service, but as a formidable force that demand better from highways, scrutinise their decisions and will not accept any compromises.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mr Hoy.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. As the first person to speak without a prepared speech, no doubt this will go very badly wrong. I've listened to Councillor Walden as ever. He read his script very well. I perhaps may have less sympathy than others with the role because it's a role you've chosen to do, however difficult it may be. I cannot add anything much to what Councillor Mrs McPherson says or Councillor Mrs Mason. I would have said everything as well that they have said. The review, as I saw it, has not been undertaken. The shortage of numbers have never been addressed adequately. The real issue, which this petition goes to, is around the lack of infrastructure and the lack of planning around that. I will reiterate what Councillor Mrs McPherson says. We as a council are not hard enough to question what we get back from Essex Highways. They say that everything is adequate where we know when we live here that things are not. With regard to the local planners past, I'll give an example where this council fails itself as well. When the local plan was adopted originally, there was specific mention by the inspector in his report that Watery Lane must be addressed properly, must be improved properly, not by putting a few lanes in just in advance of it to ease traffic moving into it. He said this must be addressed before any development is made at SER6. When that came in front of the planning committee, that was totally ignored. So this council should also look upon itself, which is what this motion is going to. So I would support the motion and the aims of the motion. I don't think I could support Councillor Ward's motion, however. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mr Hoy. Councillor Mr Efty.
Say it again.
Councillor Mr Efty.
Hello. I also empathise with residents, but it's my understanding if the core strategy is revoked, developers will be able to apply for planning permission on any land for any number of houses across the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mr Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. I would pick up on a particular point which hasn't been raised. Basically, the success of any plan is not at the time of when it's drawn up, but actually during the process that it's enacted and how it is implemented. There has been one particular area which I feel that the plan is severely deficit and could be deemed as a failure. And hopefully this might be addressed in the new local plan. What I'm talking about is in relation to travel sites. In the core strategy there is an allocation for a traveller site. However, this site is unlikely to come forward in any near future, and in recent planning applications this has been a matter that has caused problems for councillors when we've been looking at various planning applications for sites where people have occupied sites and then asked for retrospective planning. Under normal circumstances, these particular sites, bear in mind they're normally on greenfield sites or are protected sites, they would not in any way be considered appropriate for development. However, because of our current plan fails to provide traveller sites within an appropriate timescale, a number of these applications, although they may have been refused at planning, have gone on to be appealed, and some of which have been successful. This is obviously a failure of the original core strategy, and it is one area where there is a real problem. A number of people will look at matters of infrastructure, and I support the arguments around infrastructure. it does seem that there are questions relating to infrastructure needs that seem to be just batted away without any real consideration. And I find that a very worrying situation. Thank you.
Councillors, unfortunately the 15 minutes for debate is now finished. Yeah.
Sorry, 15 minutes.
Can that be allowed? Councillor Ward, can I ask you to summarise your motion briefly, please? Is it
Thank you, Chairman. The petitioner required a formal debate in Council, which we have just had. I would like to thank all those who have contributed, and all their contributions would have been noted in conjunction with the current work the Council has been embarking on regarding the preparation of a new local plan to run until 2037. The issues and options consultation on the new plan was carried out in 2018. The requirements for future housing development in the district are now calculated by government formula and the objectively assessed housing need, the OAN, for the period to 2037. This need has been calculated as being 385 dwellings per annum. The new local plan will need to set out a strategy to explain how delivery of these houses will be achieved. I'm pleased to announce the formation of a new planning policy working group drawn from members across the chamber who will work in conjunction with our planning officers to consider our options into the future. As previously stated, I propose we take no further action. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Steptoe, would you like to come up? Come back?
Chairman, just to reaffirm, I second Councillor Ward's motion.
Thank you. Mr Miles, you have 1 minute to say anything
Chairman,
further.
I'd like to move an amendment to the motion, please.
I'm afraid, Councillor Wilkinson, that the 15 minutes of debate was expired.
I asked I had my hand up before the end of the 15 minutes, Chairman, to move an amendment to the motion.
Did, but the 15 minutes had expired whilst Councillor Hookway was speaking.
He's just put the motion again.
So we can't allow the motion.
Even if we do, the motion's been proposed.
Yes.
We have to do it this motion that's been proposed.
Councillors, I can't allow the proposed alternative motion because the 15 minutes was up. And there was a motion proposed and seconded on the floor. Mr Miles.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. As I was so brief on my first reading, I think it was just over 2 minutes, I would appreciate you giving me just a little bit of latitude to run 30 seconds over. First of all, the councillor down there twice mentioned that there will be no further action. I think when it comes to Rochford District Council, you can actually read that as inaction, because that's what Rochford Council does. I mean, you know, I think the days where the council think they can feed residents a few crumbs and they'll go away, toe the line like good little boys and girls, is long gone. Let's take the Christmas tree farm, Rectory Road. You widen the junction slightly so you allowed one more car there? Do you honestly think that solved a traffic problem? You know, you talk about infrastructure. What infrastructure? Where is it? Residents have eyes. You know, we are no longer stupid. We're not blind. Where is this infrastructure, please? I'd like to see it. Where are the extra doctors? I mean, you know, where are the hospitals? Where are the extra roads? Where is the bloody infrastructure, if you excuse my French? You know, it is absolutely ridiculous. You can no longer treat us like mushrooms. I won't coin the actual phrase, but we will no longer be kept in the dark and fed with a certain nutrient. Let's put it that way. You know, residents have had enough of you guys sitting in a closed chamber and just deciding our future with no regard to us. Enough is enough. As the Labour Party learnt to their detriment in the general election, you know, you can be replaced very easily. In the heartlands of the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, they lost seats that have been held historically for 80 years. I'm just saying, people have had enough. You know, you can talk nice words, you can, you know, make platitudes, but it no longer washes. The people are awake and they know what's going on. They know there's no new infrastructure. They know you're building beyond capacity and it is no longer acceptable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, we have one motion moved by Councillor Ward and seconded by Councillor Steptoe.
Chairman, I would like to move a motion without notice, please, in accordance with the Constitution, and I propose to move this matter to the review board. Is there a seconder for that, please?
There's only the three options, isn't there?
Page 4.10 of the Constitution. E. Unwritable B.
It's 2.4.
Yes. Is that possible? Councillor Mr. Hoy, we're checking that one out. Councillor Mr. Hoy, it's not a body. It's a committee of the. It's not a body. It's a committee of the council, and there are only three options on the agenda. You can only have one of the three on the agenda, and we have a proposer and a seconder for one of those options.
Sorry, are you saying, Chairman, that the you're disallowing the motion without notice? Because I don't understand on what basis it's being refused.
I would ask you, Councillor Mr. Hoy, with respect to look at the agenda. There are only three options there.
Chairman, my understanding of motion that without notice can be moved at any time, and there is precedent for this earlier when the 2030 motion, which has now been carried and moved to review board, was moved after a motion closed.
That, Councillor Mr. Hoy, was a motion, not a petition, and there is a difference. Right.
Sorry, Chairman, there was a motion moved.
But this, Councillor Mr. Hoy, is a petition, not a motion.
Sorry, Chairman, a motion was proposed by Councillor Ward, which was seconded by Councillor Steptoe.
In accordance with the agenda. Yeah. Members, I go back to the motion that has been moved by Councillor Ward and seconded by Councillor Steptoe. Is that agreed, members? There will be a recorded vote, members.
Councillor Mrs. Belton. Councillor Burton. Councillor Mrs. Butcher. Councillor Cannell.
Against.
Councillor Mr. Carter. Councillor Mrs. Carter. Councillor Catmore.
For.
Councillor Dray.
For.
Councillor Rafferty.
For.
Councillor Eaves. Councillor Mrs Gooding. Councillor Hazelwood. Councillor Hookway.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Hoy. Councillor Mr Hoy.
Against.
Councillor Hudson. Councillor Ioannou. Councillor Lucas Gill. Councillor Mrs Lumley. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Strongly against.
Councillor Mrs McPherson. Councillor Merrick. Councillor Newport. Councillor Mrs Pavlin. Councillor Mrs Rowe. Councillor Mrs Shaw. Councillor Mr Shaw. Councillor Smith. Councillor Sperring. Councillor Stanley.
Against.
Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Ward. Councillor Webb. Councillor Mrs Weston. Councillor Wilkinson.
Against.
Councillor Williams. Councillor Wilson.
Against.
And Councillor Wotton.
Members, there were 26 votes for, 11 against and 2 abstentions, and therefore the motion is approved. Thank you, members. Mr Miles, you will receive a written copy of the Council's response to your petition, and a copy will also be uploaded on the Council website. Mr Miles and members of the public, you are more than welcome to stay for the remainder of the business. And if you'd like to leave, please do so either by the door at the back of the chamber on the right hand side, which will take you outside to the side of the building, or through the door at the front of the chamber. Thank you.
Shut them up. Shut them up. Thank you, guys. That's what it's there for. Beg pardon?
Chairman. 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 Sorry, is it? Would it be appropriate to invite members of the public who are remaining upstairs to perhaps come downstairs so they can see? Yeah, there's a lot of people going.
I think you've just done that.
Yes.
It depends on how many there are.
Chairman, would it be possible for myself and other councillors to have a written explanation of the reason the motion on notice was motion without notice was refused, so we may understand it better in the future? Thank you.
Chairman, during the debate, sorry, excuse me, Chairman. So during the debate, Councillor Ward had already moved a motion for no further action. The debate had to be within the time 15 minutes. The proposals that that were laid down in the report are taking the action requested, taking the action requested, not taking the action requested, or commissioning further investigation. The motion was already being voted and it was voted on. To move an amendment after that, you can't. Well, the motion had been moved, so we would have to vote. Yeah, but we would have to vote on that. Once the motion's on the floor, we have to deal with that. We have to deal with that vote first, and then come back. If there was amendments, then we would deal with the amendment first, and if that was lost, we would go back to the original motion.
Yes, may I have that in writing, please?
Yes.
Okay. If there are any members of the public still in room 4, they can come down to the main chamber. Thank you. Members, we'll now go on to the second petition, which was presented by Mr. Gareth James. Mr. James, you will have a total of 5 minutes to present it. After that, members, we have a total of 15 minutes in which to debate the petition. I will ask the portfolio holder for planning to respond to the petition in the first instance, and then we'll invite other members to contribute to debate. And as we only have 15 minutes in total, I'll ask as many members as possible to have an opportunity to speak. Can I please ask you to be concise and as brief as possible? Mr. James, we're just waiting for people to come up from downstairs, so my apologies if you can hang on. Mr. James, you will have the opportunity at the end of the debate to sum up for a maximum of 1 minute if you wish to do so. And you will have 5 minutes to speak, and I will remind you when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Gareth James. I'm a member of the Rayleigh Residents Association. I'm here this evening.
Could the petitioner move his payment away from the microphone? It's blocking the microphone.
I'm here this evening not only representing the people who live and work in Rayleigh, but all residents and workers across the Rochford district, over 1,500 of whom have signed a petition demanding that Rochford Council stop approving any more planning applications without the improvements that are essential to the infrastructure. Firstly, to avoid any confusion, I would like to address the wording of this petition. I want to make it crystal clear we are not against development. We appreciate there is a housing crisis which the current and previous governments have failed to address. I personally work in construction. I benefit from a thriving house building industry, but it has to be the right type of housing and has to be the right type of infrastructure in place prior to development starting. Our current government promised in 2015 to build 200,000 starter homes, but as far as I know, they haven't been built. Our concerns are that currently developers are allowed to do as they wish. The council seem reluctant to enforce their own policies and are often more concerned with the developers' profit margins. Why have policies on items such as minimum number of car parking spaces, sizes of car parking spaces, and more importantly, the percentage of affordable housing incorporated into developments has often been ignored? Can the council confirm tonight if developers are regularly allowed to deviate from such policies purely to protect their profit margins? Where is the affordable housing? The countryside development on Rorath Lane is made up of 3 to 5 bedroom properties ranging from 450,000 to 670,000. Another much smaller development at the bottom of Hambro Hill, only consisting of 4 four-bedroom properties, are priced at 630,000 and have been on the market for months. What properties are available for first-time buyers in this district? Could you also confirm this evening if the allocated affordable housing or housing association stock on the countryside development is offered to local residents, as there are examples of other developments around the district where housing associations from London have purchased large numbers of properties? Another question residents would like explained is where does the cash given to you by developers as a contribution towards infrastructure go? It's very common for developers to make promises before starting developments that doctors, community facilities, schools, etc. will be built, but they rarely materialise. However, and more importantly, before any developments even progress through planning, the adequate infrastructure should be considered. I believe the council have already admitted our roads are at or close to maximum capacity. It only takes one set of temporary traffic lights somewhere in Rayleigh for the whole town to grind to a halt. Where is the investment in this district? Are there any large infrastructure investments expected? Are the council sat on cash reserves of £10 million? Are they planning to sell assets, including this building, to raise £3.4 million for their new offices? Are they tonight going to vote to raise our council tax by the maximum they're allowed to? I have lived in Rayleigh for 5 years and the traffic has definitely got worse. The disastrous planning a few months ago where district and county councils attempted to blame each other caused absolute chaos with multiple developments all starting roadworks at the same time. This cannot be allowed to happen again, but residents can surely expect more travel chaos over the next few months, and the plan to build thousands of new homes, is this ever going to improve? The Prime Minister has been making a whole range of pledges regarding infrastructure investment, and I understand they have set 80 billion aside. Is this council pressurising the county council, demanding that there are investments made in our roads? Maybe instead of trying to squeeze as many houses as possible on every available piece of open land, some of which we know are prone to flooding.
Mr. James, you have 1 minute left.
This council should be working with other neighbouring councils and looking into proposing sites for building a new town. There have been plans submitted for a new community close to Chelmsford consisting of 5,000 homes. This seems to make much more sense as adequate infrastructure can be put in place at the start. It's also been announced Basildon Council are making a £10 million investment in the regeneration of Wickford Town Centre. Where is the investment in this district? I hope tonight we see a positive outcome and the council formally acknowledge that this can't continue. The Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner meets the public of Rochford, and I'm sure the residents would be keen for a public meeting with the council to discuss the overdevelopment issue. You cannot continue to allow houses to be built before addressing our concerns with infrastructure, and we do not accept it's not in your remit. As our elected representatives, you should be challenging the other authorities involved to address these concerns. I look forward to hearing your response to our concerns.
Thank you, Mr. James. Councillor Ward, could I ask you to respond to a petition? You have 5 minutes in which to do so.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me start my response by addressing each point, as many of the points raised. We haven't got enough time to really address them all as I would like. With regard to housing, that you've made the point, we do have 35% of all housing that comes on that has to go in regards to local needs. And as far as you were mentioning about housing that is being from outside boroughs, none of that is happening in any way, shape or form, unless they are buying it privately on the private market. None of that occurs. So just carrying on, whilst we have complaints about multiple roadworks, which I agree do cause a major disruption, there are an investment in infrastructure as a result of developers providing improvements to the road network. That said, on the matter of roadworks, a developers forum has been set up by Essex County Council and Rochford District Council to ensure there is a planned approach to road closures in future, obviously with the exception of emergency repairs. This forum was initiated by Mark Francois, who incidentally is bringing forward a private members' bill on the control of roadworks. This will meet regularly to discuss the programmes for highway works with the aim of ensuring maximum coordination together with minimum disturbance for road users. I know that you mentioned in your original thing with regard to environment and the problems there. The council does take the potential risks of pollution from road users and other sources seriously, and we're obliged under the Environment Act 1995 to monitor air quality, and we review and assess air quality in the district against the government's national air quality objectives. Information regarding air quality across the district is available on the council's website. you'll find the 2019 annual status report, which shows compliance across the district. Reports are submitted to DEFRA for approval annually and contain details of all our monitoring locations, data and trends. The Council will continue to work to minimise the influence of local vehicle emissions across the district, including the recent introduction of electric vehicle charging points. Thirdly, the current housing numbers for the period 2025 are set out in the adopted core strategy 2011 and the allocation plan 2014. These were robustly tested through public examination prior to adoption by the Council and were also challenged by way of judicial review. To set aside both the core strategy and the allocation plan will place the Council and its residents at risk of litigation and paying substantial financial compensation to developers and landowners. It would be a reckless Council that would give any consideration to an attempt to set the current plans aside. Additionally, a local authority without a plan to control and manage development may very well be an open target for ad hoc developments, something we know our residents wouldn't want. I must emphasise, every new housing scheme must contribute to the provision of new infrastructure to fully mitigate the impact of that development. The infrastructure requirements for each new housing site are set out in detail in the core strategy allocations plan. Every developer of the sites allocated in the plans will be contributing in full to the infrastructure demands of the various organisations involved, including Essex Highways, the NHS, county education, etc. Lastly, the comments about the need made for permanent sites. We were talking about travellers. I think this was something that you brought up in your initial thing. The need for sites for travellers lying in the district. And secondly, unauthorised temporary encampments, incursions into public parks. There is a modest projected requirement for a number of permanent sites for travellers within the district. However, the delivery of permanent sites will have no impact on the likelihood of incursions on public land in the future. The government is currently consulting on a possible change in the trespass legislation to allow the police and local authorities
Councillor Ward, you have 1 minute.
With unauthorised encampments, a solution we have been waiting a long time for. Finally, in reference to a comment suggested that councillors do not respond to emails, I noted that one, or where there is a response is not considered to be adequate, I personally respond to all emails and, like many of my fellow councillors, prefer to engage in one-to-one conversation with our residents, whilst endeavouring to always give full and frank responses to the questions asked. Over the next few months, there will be ample opportunities for residents to discuss the details of the next local plan, and I'd like to invite yourself and your Residents Association to be part of that. You know, I'll be happy to consider options for public meetings as work progresses, and would ask residents to register online if they haven't already done so about future local plan meetings. But in the meantime, as it stands, I would propose that there be no further action and we continue as we are doing now with our local plans.
Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll second that proposition, and like before, I'll reserve the right to speak at the end of the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. I have a number of members who wish to speak.
On a point of order, I didn't quite catch what the motion was. I didn't actually hear a motion. Was it no further?
Can you repeat that, Councillor?
Yeah, of course. I propose that there be no further action in light of the local plan that we are developing.
And that has been seconded. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I do not support that motion in any way, shape or form, and whilst I have the greatest respect for Councillor Ward for the difficult job that he does, he's spent 5 minutes not really answering what Rochester Council is doing, has told us what Mark Francois is doing, and talked a lot about air quality and the turning away of the core strategy and local plan. Now, nobody's asking for the core strategy and local plan to be revoked. I totally agree with his comments that we shouldn't do, but that's not what the petition says. So I'm not sure why that's been mentioned or why air quality was spoken about for such a great length of time as an important subject that it is. The traveller sites are an important issue, Members will know, no doubt, the correspondence that's been going on between Rawhurst Parish Council and our planning departments just today regarding the legal or the expected legal encampments in St John's Road. These are happening all the time, and I think it's, with respect, slightly naive to think that if we had a legitimate traveller site that would stop the incursions. That's not going to happen. I also think that the Rochford Council response to the Essex County Council consultation on infrastructure contributions was slightly worrying in its comments around marginal developments. We appear to be concerned about marginal developments. There's no definition of what a marginal development is, but the way that it's written, it implies that if a developer is going to have marginal profit, and maybe I'm reading incorrectly between the lines, but that's how it reads, then that may deter them from building, in which case we won't get a development, in which case we won't get affordable housing. So what we're saying is that that is more important, developers' profit margins is more important, so we won't ask for an infrastructure contribution. And it's slightly incorrect to say that we get contributions from every single one. I can quote two developments, the Dairy Crest proposal, which is yet to be ratified by the Development Committee, but certainly came forward to development last month, and the Star Lane development, both of which exceeded the 35 houses or units, neither of which the planning department were insisting any contributions were made for. There was no affordable housing and no infrastructure development. So it's not happening at all. I think it's what we could do and what we should be doing is we should be looking at an independent consultant to look at our own infrastructure needs, because we are blindly accepting what Essex County Council say. It's not right. I have a question on notice regarding the highway, so I'm not going to double up. However, we are accepting what they say, and I think you know, without any party lines here, we all accept the fact that Essex County Council's stance on highways is not ours, and we need to do something about that. And I'm not hearing anything being done about that at all. So I move that we do have a public meeting, that we should have a public meeting with residents, because why not? The Police and Fire Commissioner has a public meeting regularly with residents. The police have public meetings with the residents. The local MP has public meetings with residents. He had it before Brexit, but we don't. We hide away. Okay, we welcome people into here, but we don't give them a chance to speak. We give one person 5 minutes and it's too regulated. Why not? Why not have that meeting with our residents and sit there and talk about their concerns? So, Chairman, I move for an alternative motion that we do have a public meeting and we do take on board the issues contained within this petition. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Yes. Councillor Wilkinson, there is only the three options to choose from as per the agenda, one of which has been proposed and seconded.
Okay. In that case then, Chairman, I move for an alternative motion that we commission further work and further investigation into this matter and if necessary send it to the review committee.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Ward, what's your point of order?
I fully accept what Councillor Wilkinson is trying to get across, and I did say that I would welcome, as I said, I would ask residents to register online, but I would happy to consider options for public meetings as the work progresses. So that is as the work progresses. So as we progress our local plan, I was quite happy with that. Therefore, I would continue with my proposition as it stands.
For the matter of clarity, I would second Councillor Wilkinson's motion.
Members, we have a proposal and a seconder for the motion on the floor, and I shall take a vote on that.
Chairman, for clarification purposes, Councillor Ward has put a motion on the floor. There's not been an amendment to that motion. You're moving. Councillor Wilkinson is moving a new motion. So we have to deal with the motion on the floor. You're not moving an amendment to that motion.
In that case, I move for an amendment to the motion. As maybe it's a play on words, but I'm moving an amendment then.
How are you moving the amendment for no further action?
That we do action. We take action.
That is not.
And we said, you're telling me we have to choose one of the three options, and so I've chosen one of the three options.
That would be a vote against it.
Pardon? No, it's not. I'm putting another option forward.
It's a new motion. To change it to no further would be negating that motion. You have to amend that motion that's on the floor.
Okay, well, my Chairman, could I just ask for maybe some advice then from our legal representative that I'm trying to read this and I'm trying to do the right thing here, as you all know. So I'm moving an amendment that I don't think no further action is the right thing. I think action is the right thing. I was asked what that action is, and I was told I had to choose one of these. So I've chosen one of these. So if you're saying I can't choose one of these, then how do I move an amendment?
Well, the motion. Sorry, Chairman. The Chairman, you need to move an actual amendment. How you move it, it's a matter for you. You cannot negate a motion that's on the floor.
Okay, my amendment is then that we don't take any further action. It's sent to the review committee.
But that's negating the actual original motion. You need to amend it.
Okay, right. I've got some more people who wish to speak.
Clarity then, can you please confirm that if a motion is moved that no action be taken, we are unable to move any other motion apart from no action?
Correct, because the rules are in the Constitution. The Council will decide how to respond to the petition at the meeting by either taking the action requested in the petition, not taking the action requested for reasons put forward in debate and commission further investigation. Councillor Ward has put forward a motion to no further action.
I would like to know, we out of politeness allowed the portfolio holder to speak, at which point he then moves his motion. We are at no point able to move anything other than an amendment to his motion at that point. If in all cases the first speaker, which would always be the portfolio holder, moves a motion of no action, that means we as a council are unable to do anything but follow that no action. That doesn't seem to be within the spirit or the wording of the rules.
That, Councillor Hoy, is as per the Constitution. I will let you come back, Councillor Wilkinson. I've got some other speakers and we're running out of time. Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chairman. I am somewhat disturbed about the way that this is being handled tonight, but that's another thing for another time. To put my remarks in context, I was born about 100 yards up the road from where I live in Hawkwell. So I have seen a huge change in the traffic flow in the area. Well, by huge, I mean huge. When I've been on the Development Committee and questioned issues regarding highways, I've always been told, well, that's the rules. Okay, so then the natural assumption with that then is with what we're seeing on the ground and what we're seeing with the residents being here tonight is that there's a problem with the rules. So I then contacted officers who said, well, that's sacrosanct, we can't do anything about that. I contacted Highways and they said exactly the same thing. So I'm thinking, right, well, what can I do? So these rules are put in place by recommendations from the Highway Engineers Institute. I got in touch with them and I explained the situation that we have in this area here and that society has changed in that where we have a road like the B1013, you have deliveries being done all the time now. And every time there's a delivery done, the road backs up. We have a situation where quite a few years ago, it was reported that the B1013, was at 80% capacity. Now, I understand that 80% capacity is actually full. Now, that is a number of years ago. So we cannot fail to notice that there has been a big increase in the amount of traffic on our roads. Now, when we are considering this in context of the rules, I would suggest that myself, being a lone voice, asking and questioning about the rules, is not going to be very effective, because an institute like the Highways Engineers Institute are not going to be listening to one councillor. But what I would ask to happen is that this council agrees to start questioning the rules. They say that these rules are based on their models and their formulas, and that those models and formulas are tried and tested. The problem is that there is a difference between the theory and the practice. They are seeing the theory, we are seeing the practice. There is a problem with their formulas and their models that they do now. I think that would be very, very difficult to dispute at the moment because of what we are actually seeing on the ground. So I would ask that we as a council agree to start questioning the rules at the roots. If we as a council get together and start questioning this, people are going to start taking notice and they are going to start questioning their own standards. If we don't do that, we're just going to get more of the same. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Eaves, thank you very much. That is the finish of the 13 minutes. I will now ask Councillor Ward to summarise, please, very briefly.
Can I raise a point of order, please? I just want some clarification on this. We've been told there's a motion for no further action. Now, the options given are taking the action requested in the petition, not taking the action requested for reasons put forward in the debate, or commissioning further investigation. Well, unfortunately, the motion was put before we had a debate. So how can we decide not to take action requested for reasons put forward in a debate when the debate was not allowed, which to my mind is effectively predetermination of the decision? Can I have some clarity, please?
Councillor Mrs Weston, the debate started at the minute that Councillor Ward began to speak, and we've got 15 minutes from that time, which is now nearly up. I shall ask Councillor Ward to summarise, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I do empathise with a lot of the items that have been risen with regard to highways and various things like that. But, I mean, we have to recognise the Council is now preparing a new local plan, and the working assumptions for the annual rate of housing delivery required for the new plan period to 2037, which may or may not be open to challenge. This takes into consideration the items raised with regard to highways and things like that, which we'll look at, but are based on nationally prepared housing projections and a standard methodology given to local authorities by the government, all options of which will be seriously considered. But in the meantime, I again propose that there be no further action and we continue on the route delivering our local plan. Thank you.
Councillor Steptoe, would you like to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I will affirm that I second the motion, but I will just add that in
Order, Chairman, it's been established previously that although the Secretary may reserve the right to speak, they have no right to speak over and above other councillors. Thank you.
I'll leave it at that, Chairman. That's fine.
Thank you.
On a point of order, Chairman, may I remove a motion to amend the motion as put, that we take no further action, and in the words of, or the paraphrased words of Arthur Dent from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, we put this report in a filing cabinet in the basement of this building. Thank you.
Mr James, you have 1 minute to further sum up if you'd like to say anything more. Thank you.
Yeah, personally I think it's a disgrace that our concerns aren't being recognised, and from what Councillor Ward said, I think it's a disgrace that our concerns aren't being recognised by this council. To have a 15-minute debate on such an important issue is a joke. I think Councillor Ward has agreed to a public meeting then. So a venue You said you were happy to have a public meeting. Well, do we get any time frame on that?
That will come out in the report too, I would suggest. Is that you finished?
Yeah, nothing else to say.
Thank you, Mr. James. Members, we have a motion moved by Councillor Ward and seconded by Councillor Steptoe. Is that agreed, members? There'll be a recorded vote, members.
Councillor Mrs Barton. Councillor Burton. Councillor Mrs Butcher. Councillor Canal. Councillor Carter. Councillor Mrs Carter. Councillor Catmore.
For.
Councillor Dray.
4.
Councillor FD.
4.
Councillor Reeves. Councillor Mrs Gooding. Councillor Hazelwood. Councillor Hookway.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Hoy. Councillor Mr Hoy.
Against.
Councillor Hudson. Councillor Ioannou. Councillor Lucas Gill. Councillor Mrs Lumley. Councillor Mrs Mason. Councillor Mrs McPherson. Councillor Merrick. Councillor Newport. Councillor Mrs Pavlin. Councillor Mrs Rowe. Councillor Mrs Shaw. Councillor Mr Shaw. Councillor Smith. Councillor Sperring. Councillor Stanley. Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Ward. Councillor Webb. Councillor Mrs Weston. Councillor Wilkinson.
Against.
Councillor Williams. Councillor Wilson.
Against.
Councillor Wotton.
For.
Members, there were 24 votes for, 13 against and 1 abstention, and therefore the motion is passed. Thank you very much. Mr. James, you will receive a written copy of the councillor's response to your petition, and a copy will also be uploaded onto the council's website. Members of the public, you are more than welcome to stay for the remaining business, but if you'd like to leave, please do so by either by the door at the back of the chamber or the right hand side, which will take you outside to the side of the building, or through the door to the front of the chamber. Thank you. Sorry.
because they missed it. Yeah, but it's got to be first. You shouldn't allow motions on substance and they're not politics. It's just an excuse to stand up and speak.
Members, I will now take item 13 on the agenda, setting the council tax 2020 to 21. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, this is my first budget as leader of the Conservative administration. The budget pressures under which local government operates remain significant, and this authority continues to look closely at opportunities to make efficient savings and generate new sources of revenue. This is not only in response to the removal of government grants, but also to deal with significant cost increases arising from inflationary and demographic pressures. Looking to the future, we have refreshed our business plan for the period 2020-23 in parallel with the preparation of the medium-term financial strategy, so that the two align. The business plan sets out a high-level priorities that the Council will work towards over the medium term. This will incorporate the Council's plan to deliver an exciting asset programme which aims to maximise the value of the Council's key strategic sites and its Connect and Cultural Transformation programme to ensure members, staff can operate as 21st century public servants and improve our digital interface with residents. Our priorities are set out in the refreshed business plan are being financially sustainable, use only intervention to manage demand on our service. I'll say that again. Use early intervention to manage demand on our services, maximise our assets, and enable communities. Despite the challenges faced, we have continued to deliver excellent services to our residents, and our achievements in the past year include, although not exclusively, being placed seventh in the league for recycling out of more than 350 local authorities across England, continuing reduction number of homeless households being placed out of our district emergency temporary accommodation, maintaining unqualified set of financial accounts and value for money option from our external auditors, unveiling plans for 125,000 revamp of 3 play areas, undertaking Control of Pollution Act works during the recent railway bridge works in Hall Road, installing electric chargers in 5 of our council car parks, one of them right just outside our door here, obtaining a £10,000 lottery grant to create an online CGI tour of the HMS Beagle, partnering with CHESS, that's the Church's Homeless Energy Support Scheme, to relieve homeless and related hardship, launching the Open Doors project in Rochford Town Square, which is in the Old King's Head pub, and I would recommend members, if you are in there, please pop in and have a look. continuing to provide local businesses with advice and support, including hosting various business breakfasts, being nominated as finalists for the Old House in Rochford and the Rayleigh Windmill here in Rayleigh, obviously, in the Essex Wedding Awards 2020 category for Historic Wedding Venue of the Year, producing a free cookbook and videos to help residents cut back on food waste. Following a careful management plan, following a careful management plan, populations of health rare care butterflies thriving in Hopley Woods. Sorry, I got a bit tongue-tied there. As a responsible council, we continue to look at areas where costs can be reduced or income generated. However, in 2020, there is a need to increase the council tax by 2.15% to help fund the financial pressures that the district is currently facing. This equates to an increase of 10p per household per week on a Band D property. The proposal is set Rochford District Council's tax for Band D property at £235.26p per year. The breakdown of the annual tax for Band D property would be Essex County Council £1,204.92p, Essex County Council Social Care Levy £116.19, Essex County Fire and Rescue £73.89, Essex Police Fire and Crime Commissioner £198.63, the average town / parish council £51.74, and Rochford District Council £235.26. The total average tax for Band D property for 2020-21 would be £1,880.63, an increase of £65.81, approximately 3.63%. In conclusion, although these are still difficult financial times, Rochford District Council remains committed to providing an excellent service to our residents and partners. With this in mind, we will be doing all we can to deliver innovative and high quality services. Chairman, I commend the Rochford District Council tax for members' approval, and I make that as a proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Steptoe, have you a seconder for that? Councillor Smith? Oh, sorry,
Chairman, I will
Councillor
second
Rowe.
that. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies, Councillor Smith. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we all appreciate the amount of work that goes into financial planning. We all financial plan. We do it in our own homes, we have our own budgets, and we are prudent with those budgets. Generally, people try not to overspend and not to get into debt, and this council so far has not got into debt. However, a prudent budget is spending what's needed, not necessarily what's wanted. And there are two variations upon this. I must admit, I have grave reservations about approving a budget where it includes a new discretionary fund reserve of £50,000 for the leader to dispense with, and we have no knowledge as of yet how. That is a concern. The concern also that we always go for the maximum, 2.15%. Why do we do that? And the leader has said it's 10p a week. Yeah, it's 10p a week. You haven't got 10p. It's a lot, but it's not 10p a week because we add on the other taxes, and as has been noted, it's £65. £65 from a tight budget, and a lot of our residents are on restricted budgets, is a lot of money. And that is on Band D, and I don't believe that we have the majority of our houses on Band D. I suspect they're higher, and I suspect the impact on our residents will be higher. So I remain concerned, especially against the maximum increase, and I'm sure there are items within this that we could have made the increase more modest for our residents. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to make 2 points. The first is following on from something Councillor Mrs Mason has just said about prudent financial planning that we all do as homeowners. We all look, and there are plenty of sites out there to help us to do so, for cheaper ways of obtaining the services that we use at home, whatever that may be. We're always doing it. Every year it comes up for review, and I'm sure everybody in this chamber does it. So I would therefore ask the question, because I don't know the answer, is do we do that? Now, I know we are linked into contracts. I understand that. How are those contracts dealt with? When are they up for renewal? And are we seeking to try and offset some of our gaps that we're trying to fund by actually getting cheaper contracts? That's the first point I'd like to make. And the second point is, following on again from this budget, that I too have reservations. Something I mentioned last week's full council meeting when we were discussing the budget, it's something that I've mentioned in emails since, is that I note that the council in October gave authority for the portfolio holder for environment to, not for environment, for communities rather, to form a working group to look at CCTV, following on from my motion for CCTV. That authority told us to report back within 9 months. That 9 months, Chairman, is July, which is only 3 months into the next financial year. Yet, not a penny has been set aside in the capital budget at all for CCTV. And a few months prior to that, we also agreed to start looking at carbon neutrality, which is actually probably even more an important issue. And not a penny has been set aside for that either. And I too, as Councillor Mrs Mason has concerns, I too have concerns how we can ratify a budget that doesn't have everything considered within it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. I would just say that the budget was already agreed at the meeting last week, so this report is purely about setting the council tax level, which is associated with the budget, which was agreed last week. But if there's any particular questions, I'm happy to take them outside of this meeting.
Thank you. Right. Councillor Mr Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, yes, we are aware it's on the setting the council tax. However, obviously the council tax was effectively set by setting the budget last week, and everything around the budget pertains to the council tax. I can't agree to a 2.15% increase. £67,000 is going straight to reserves for no reason. That's half the increase approximately. The other half is smoke and mirrors as far as I'm concerned. Again, to agree with Councillor Wilkinson, there are 2 working groups, none of which have provisions within the budget which pertains to the council tax. If, for instance, the council tax, £67,000 going to reserves, may have been allocated 50-50 to CCTV and the 2030 working group, I could understand that, but it isn't. It's put to general reserves. We should be looking further ahead, and we are failing to do so. With regards to the £50,000, which is also relevant because this budget funds it, I've requested confirmation of what this is for, and I understand that Mr Scrutton will be sending at the end of this week the details of that. However, perhaps the leader could confirm if, has been stated on social media by a Conservative councillor, that this will be available for the use of all councillors if they request it to the leader. I will not be supporting the budget. Thank you. Sorry.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to begin, as you can see from the public gallery, the residents are concerned about the council and how it's being run to the benefit of the residents in the council tax and other things. To this, I mean all the residents, not just those that are represented by Conservatives, but represented by other parties and ward councillors. As it is well known that some of our councillors are not being involved in actions taken by the council, and therefore the residents' views of what we represent are not being heard or taken into account on many projects. We have heard from the leader who initially would like contact with other members of the council, not just his own. Unfortunately, we have heard that this has not been acceptable. My question to the leader is this going to change in the future so that all of the residents will be heard through their ward councillors? This request considers with the peer review to bring the minority into the consultation with the council. I do find that over the past 5 years, more than 1.5 million has been wasted with projects that really have not been fulfilled. I've heard that a considerable amount in the council's funds has been earmarked for other usages. I'm not sure if we have been told of these, but nevertheless there are projects which we need to be prioritised sooner rather than later. These funds have been collected from the residents and should be used for the residents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Councillor Efti.
Come back on that, Councillor. We had 2 meetings to discuss the budget, where all councillors were invited, and only 2 members of the minority parties turned up to the second meeting.
Members, I don't see anybody else indicating they wish to speak. I shall therefore, if you could turn to page 10 on the recommendations as set out, turn to the 10 recommendations that are set out on page 13.3 of the report. I will go through the recommendations in turn, in line with the Council Procedure Rule 17.3 set out on page 4.15 of the Constitution. I would ask for a show of hands for each recommendation. Recommendation 1 is set out on page 13.3 of the report. Is that agreed, members? Yes, sorry, show of hands. Those for? Against? Any abstentions? That member has been approved. Recommendation 2 is set out on page 13.3 of the report. Those in favour, please indicate. Those against? Any abstentions? That members have been approved. Recommendation 3 is set out on page 13.3 of the report. All those in favour, members? Any against? Any abstentions? That's been approved, members. Recommendation 4 is set out on page 13.3 of the report. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? That has been agreed, members. Recommendation 5 is set out on page 13.3 of the report. Those in favour? Those against?
May my vote be recorded against, please, Chairman?
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Anybody else? Any abstentions? Sorry, can those who want their votes recorded please put their hands up again? Any abstentions? Thank you. That members have been approved. Recommendation 6 set out on page 13.3 of the report. Those in favour? Those against?
You can't vote twice.
Any abstentions? That members has been approved. Recommendation 8 on page 13.3 of the report. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? That's been approved, members. Recommendation 9, also on page 13.3 of the report. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? That members again has been approved. Lastly, recommendation 10, also on page 13.3 of the report. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That again has been approved. Thank you very much. The motions have been approved. So that includes item 13, members. And now I'll go on to item 7. Item 7, agenda item 14, Local Council Tax Support Scheme 2020-21. Councillor Smith will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there'll be more, or there have been more controversial things on the agenda than this item. This scheme originally came about in 2013. It's been much talked about year on year, and there are no major changes apart from an inflationary increase. This is a good scheme. It includes a hardship fund, and I move the recommendation on 8.1 and 8.2.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Smith, Councillor Hudson?
I'll be pleased to second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hudson. Any questions, members? Councillor Mr Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. I think everyone should be used to me now speaking on this every year, actually. I still do not agree that on page 64, it's actually 14.67 of the report, I'm not sure, item, well, 29A1, top of the page on item 14, appendix 1. And it refers to, on the previous page, you'll have minimum income floor, and this relates to self-employed people. And there's an assumption within the plan that self-employed people will be working 35 hours a week at the minimum wage. I've disagreed with this every year. It's been put forward for obvious reasons, because not every self-employed person will get the minimum wage. They're not governed by the minimum wage law. They can earn £1 an hour, and that's legal. And this is my problem with the report. So therefore I'm proposing a motion that 29.A.1 is removed from page 64 of the actual report, page 14.67 of our report. I don't know if I have a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Hookway. Yes?
I second Councillor Hoy's amendment.
Thank you. We will therefore debate the amendment. Any members wish to have any questions on that amendment, please? Councillor Hoy, would you have an interest as a self-employed person?
I'm not self-employed, no, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
For clarity, I work for a company owned by my wife, thank you.
Okay. Councillor FD, did you wish to speak?
I'm actually self-employed, so I don't know if I've got conflict or not.
Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. For clarity, I am self-employed, but I don't think that prevents me from participating in this debate or in voting for this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Burton.
Thank you. Can I just ask Councillor Smith, the data that Councillor Hoy is disagreeing with, why is that data like presented in that format in the report? Is that something that we are guided to do? Is it something that we've chosen to do? What is there a reason behind that?
The technical question I'll refer to.
I would just say that the scheme has been prepared in consultation with an independent specialist who's provided advice on the scheme, and it's consistent with a number of schemes both across the Essex area and nationally. The rationale behind having a minimum wage and a minimum number of hours is to provide sort of parity and fairness in terms of how individual applicants are assessed against those that are not self-employed. So it is to provide a sort of a baseline of parity in terms of assessment.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. Very briefly, and question for Naomi, if you wouldn't mind. With that in mind, are you able to indicate what impact, if any, would have if we were to remove that paragraph?
I'm afraid I wouldn't have that data to hand. It's possible that we may be able to run some figures to provide some sort of financial assessment of the impact that would have on us as authority, but I think it's safe to say it would obviously have a financial impact. The scheme has to be contained within the sort of financial parameters which were when the government introduced the scheme in 2013, which provided a reduction in the total funding available of 10%. So the scheme is designed to be cost neutral as a council and to provide fairness and parity to all those that may be eligible for the scheme. But in terms of specifics, I'd have to take that away.
Any other questions, members? Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I will be supporting Councillor Hoy's amendment because I don't think that with the increase in numbers of self-employed people in our district, I don't think we should be penalising them at a point in time where possibly they need our help.
Any other questions on Councillor Hoy's amended motion, please? No? Councillor Hoy, can I ask that you read out again or explain again your amended motion for clarity?
Thank you, Chairman. It's not an amended motion, it's a motion. Under 29A.0 that we remove paragraph 29A.1 and the reference to the substituted amount of 35 hours per week multiplied by the national living wage removes the entire paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I don't see anybody else indicating they wish to speak on that. I shall take a vote. Those in favour of the motion, please, the amended motion. Those against? Any abstentions? That members has failed. Thank you very much. We shall now go back to the original motion as proposed by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Hudson. Any other questions on that, members? No? In that case, members, there are two recommendations as set out on recommendation one is set out on page 14.2 of the report. Can I have a show of hands, please? In favour? Against? Abstentions? That member. Sorry. That members has been passed.
And the numbers were, Chairman?
Members, recommendation 2 is set on page 14.3 of the report. Is that agreed, members? I'll take a show of hands this time. Those against? This is we're taking recommendation 2. Numbers on the previous one. I can let you have the numbers. Could we? No. Sorry, it wasn't a recorded vote, so...
No, sorry, I did correct my wording. I said recorded, and then I said, sorry, I mean noted. Thank you.
Okay. Your vote will be noted then, Councillor Hoy.
Sorry, Chairman. As in the previous meeting last week, some of the votes were noted in the minutes. That's what I was requesting, that the notes be
Yes.
that the vote be noted in the minutes. But
Yes.
I misspoke and used the word recorded, and then I used the word noted afterwards. But you may not have heard that.
Okay. If you want the numbers noted, it has to be a recorded vote, councillors. That was last week, I'm afraid. Right.
Mr. Chairman, as a point of order, when you're if we are taking a vote, we're not asking for a recorded vote. We're asking for the numbers for, the numbers against, and the numbers that abstain. That is perfectly normal. It has been done in this council for years, and I don't think you can just say we can't have that.
Right, it says in the Constitution that the vote will be by a show of hands unless a recorded vote is demanded under Rule 17.4. The chairman will take the vote by a show of hands.
It doesn't state that you can't count those hands. Surely the officer counts the hands to know if the vote is passed or not, and if they're counting them, can they not disclose that information? I don't believe this. Democracy, it's not.
It's a majority vote by show of hands, and it was clearly in favour of the recommendation. Sorry? The votes have been taken, members. I shall move on to recommendation 2, set on page 14.3 of the report. Is that agreed, members?
If we can't count them, then we're going to have recorded votes on everything. I would ask the legal officer to consider this situation, because this is farcical.
I agree.
Chairman, I'd like to say, I heard a comment just then, we're making it farcical. We are not. We're actually just following over a stand which was made last week in this chamber where votes were noted and announced. You can't change the rules week on week without good reason.
And for a matter of clarity, Mr. Chairman, do excuse me, but this has been going on for years. As far back as Chris Black's time, this used to happen. And I'm sure Councillor Cutmore will recall that. It's never been disallowed before. So what undemocratic reasons have we got?
There'll be a recorded vote, members, on recommendation 2.
Councillor Mrs Belton. Councillor Burton. Councillor Mrs Butcher. Councillor Canal. Councillor Carter. Councillor Mrs Carter. Councillor Cutmore. Councillor Dray.
4.
Councillor Refty.
Abstain.
Councillor Reeves. Councillor Mrs Gooding. Councillor Hazelwood. Councillor Hookway.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Hoy. Councillor Mr Hoy. Councillor Hudson. Councillor Ioannou. Councillor Lucas Gill. Councillor Mrs Lumley. Councillor Mrs Mason. Councillor Mrs McPherson, Councillor Merrick, Councillor Newport, Councillor Mrs Pavlin, Councillor Mrs Rowe, Councillor Mrs Shaw, Councillor Mr Shaw, Councillor Smith, Councillor Sperring, Councillor Stanley, Councillor Steptoe, Councillor Ward, Councillor Webb, Councillor Mrs Weston, Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Williams, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Wotton,
Members, there were 29 votes for, 5 against and 4 abstentions. The motion is therefore approved, members. That concludes item 14. I shall now go on to item 15, Pay Policy Statement 2020-2021. Mr Strutton, Managing Director, will introduce this report.
Chairman, thank you. Very little to say. This sets out the Council's pay policy statement in accordance with the requirements of the Localism Act 2011.
Any questions, members? Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I seem to be taking up a lot of your time this evening. This is merely a question which I'm hoping which I'd like some clarification on, and I am hoping that the Managing Director will be able to clarify this. On Appendix 1, point 3.9, it says the Council does not apply performance-related pay or bonuses. However, does a bonus for attendance not constitute a performance-related payment, as is detailed in 4.1? There just seems to be a contradiction in that report that I'd like clarified first. Thank you.
Well, Chairman, the Council does not, in principle, apply performance-related pay or bonuses. The reference, I believe, is to a small payment that is made in relation to an attendance allowance of officers of the Council.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I wasn't aware it was a small payment because the amount isn't noted, but I accept that it's not considered a bonus then in that case. Thank you.
I cannot see anybody else indicating they wish to speak. Wish to speak? Sorry.
Yeah, just to clarify that the main point of the report is that we are obviously opted into the national sort of pay terms and conditions, so we don't have a locally set performance-related pay scheme, but obviously on top of that we have a locally agreed discretionary scheme which does provide us an amount for a small bonus for exemplary attendance by council officers, but that is a locally set discretionary policy which we choose to apply locally, but in the main our salary scales are set with it in line with the national terms and conditions.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Sorry, very briefly, I may have misunderstood here, but I'm sure Mr Scrutton said that you don't have bonuses. Naomi's just used the word bonus. I'm not sure which it is. If money is paid to people for attendance, I'm not suggesting I have an issue with that, but I'd just like some clarity as to the parameters for that. Are we saying it's like a well done, you've attended, you haven't had a sick day, or whatever it happens to be, which is a bonus in my eyes, and it clearly is the words that have been used by Naomi, which seems to be at odds with what the MD said.
Okay. Well, I can provide councillors with the wording of the policy which we have, which is called a staff award, an attendance award, which is awarded for 100% attendance for a 6-monthly period. Officers are eligible to receive £50 if they have 100% attendance over a 6-month period. So that So perhaps I misspoke when I used the word bonus, but that is the nature of the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, no other members are indicating they wish to speak. I shall therefore take recommendation as set out on page 15.2 of the report, paragraph 7.1. It is proposed that the Council resolves that the Pay Policy Statement 2020-21 be adopted. Is that agreed, members, by a show of hands? Those against? Any abstentions? That members has been approved. Thank you. That concludes item 15. Item 16, appointment of independent persons and parish representatives to the Standards Committee. Angela, our Assistant Director, will introduce this report.
Thank you, Chairman. The report is to seek approval to appoint 3 independent persons to the Standards Committee and to endorse 3 parish councillors to the Standards Committee. The report seeks that the authority is delegated to me as a monitoring officer to recruit the independent persons to the posts in accordance with the criteria set down in the Localism Act. In relation to the parish councillors, once agreed, the Rochford 100 Association will be approached for their nominations. These councillors are not voting members of the Standards Committee, but as the District Council is responsible for dealing with the parish council's complaints, their views will be and are taken into account on any standards matter relating or affecting the parish councils. So, Chairman, this report seeks the approval of the recommendations put forward on page 16.2 of the report.
Any questions, members? No? There are 2 recommendations. Recommendation 1 is set out on page 16.2 of the report. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Recommendation 2 also set out on page 16.2 of the report. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you, members. That concludes this item 16. And then go back into item 6. Member questions on notice. Comfort break, yes. I've gavelled. I have. Members, if I can ask you to take your places now, please. Members, I'll now take item 6 on the agenda, members' questions on notice, of which there are 3. Question 1 has been raised by Councillor Wilkinson and is for the portfolio holder for planning. Councillor Wilkinson, would you please ask you to print your question to the committee, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Could the portfolio holder for planning please explain what actions Rochford District Council is taking to challenge the views of the county's Highways Department about the impact of new developments on the highways network, which often seems to be at odds with those of district councillors?
Councillor Ward, can I ask you to respond to that, please?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I absolutely fully share members' frustrations in regards to this, whereby highways decisions are seemingly at odds with those of district councillors, which then ask the questions, what are our options? As Essex Highways are a statutory consultee, the options become narrower. I felt the best way forward was to see if we could organise training sessions for members regarding the role Essex Highways takes as a statutory consultee for planning applications. Essex Highways officers would be present to field any questions that members may have, and I would strongly encourage members to attend to assist them in gaining a better understanding of what is considered by highways in an application and how they arrive at their conclusions. I hope this will go some way towards addressing members' concerns. As an additional thought, should members have specific issues that they wish to raise about any specific planning application, I would encourage them to contact the case officer who will be able to raise these matters at the recently established weekly meetings between the local Essex Highway officer and our planning officers, where any concerns, where possible, can be resolved. To conclude, myself as portfolio holder for planning, Councillor Mike Steptoe as leader, working in conjunction with the Essex County Council portfolio holder for infrastructure, Councillor Kevin Bentley, together with help initiated by Mark Francois, has resulted upon Essex establishing the Developers Forum. Now established, this is intended to coordinate the activities of putting new infrastructure in place in the course of planned developments, as well as the updating of existing infrastructure, excluding emergency repairs. There is no doubt that any roadworks will be disruptive, but we are trying to establish good cooperative working practices to minimise the disruption to residents. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Wilkinson, do you have a supplementary question that you wish to ask, which must be linked to the original question or the response given by Councillor Ward?
I don't have a question. Well, I suppose I do have a question. I'd just like to come back, if I may. Thank you for the answer, Councillor Ward. What I would say is that it sounds from what you're saying, and I'm not trying to knock the idea because I embrace any training that is offered by the council, so thank you for that. But it does sound as though that is us being taught what county are doing as opposed to us challenging county, which is really what my question was. I, and the leader is aware of this as well as Councillor Lumley, I've actually contacted Councillor Bentley myself as a lowly backbencher regarding the Highways Department and challenging their views. Now, if I can do that, then surely as a council, with respect, you can do that.
Would you like to come back, Councillor Ward?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. As far as challenging, I've asked our officers to actually challenge and go back and make a challenge in regards to any decision that comes from highways if they feel that there is an issue. But I think it's actually important to understand how highways actually arrive at their decisions, hence the idea of this interaction, so we can actually have this training session with highways officers to actually even challenge them there and there. It gives a good opportunity for us to understand exactly where they are coming from in their decisions, how they make those decisions. And I think it may further somewhere what you are asking and what we all want, where quite often a lot of things are at odds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Question 2 has been raised by Councillor Mr Hoy and is for the portfolio holder for planning. Councillor Mr Hoy, can I ask you to present your question to the council?
Thank you, Chairman. Can the portfolio holder for planning please confirm that they have full confidence in this council's planning policies and that it should be at the discretion of councillors whether those policies should not be applied to certain planning applications?
Councillor Ward, can I ask you to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. What an excellent question. Councillors, I believe, should of course use their discretion when determining planning applications, as long as they are basing their decisions on our current planning policies regarding recognising that the weight and interpretation given to a specific policy will vary when considering the merits of an individual application. However, further to the Council's own policies, particular consideration should be given to the National Planning Policy Framework and any emerging case law from recent planning applications. Therefore, I not only have full confidence in the Council's planning policies, more importantly, I have full confidence in our members who adjudicate on applications, together with their ability to resolve a reasoned, balanced judgment on the merits of each individual case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Mr Hoy, do you have a supplementary question which must be linked to the original question or Councillor Ward's response?
Thank you, Chairman. Based on your answer, Councillor, can you confirm why you think there is such a discrepancy between what members believe is an acceptable discrepancy and what officers believe is an acceptable discrepancy.
Councillor Ward.
As I said, it is about actually looking at how you weigh something, where you have a policy and how that policy is weighed. Again, different weight is given to different interpretations of it. And again, if there is a final adjudication on anything, it's then down to the inspector, because if it goes to appeal, he is the final arbiter of everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Question 3 has also been raised by Councillor Mr Hoy and is for the Leader of the Council. Councillor Hoy, can I ask you to present your question, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I wrote this one without punctuation, but I believe it is understandable. Would the Leader of the Council please confirm to members how the workings of the Review Working Group 2030 are feeding back into the Council leadership on progress they are making and how the Executive are planning for the future whilst keeping in mind the possible results of the Working Group 2030 and how that may affect future plans?
Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Hoy, for the question. And please bear with me, the answer is a little bit of a tongue twister, so please bear with me. The working group has the support of the Assistant Director, Place and Environment and Overview and Scrutiny Officer. The officers have a two-way dialogue with the relevant members of staff within the Council and the other authorities to gather information to be provided to the working group. This information has come either in the form of briefing notes or, as with the case with the Council's assets, the Assistant Director Assets and Commercial and Portfolio Holder for Enterprise have attended meetings of the working group to discuss and answer questions on the issues. The Portfolio Holder for Environment has attended the working group as an observer and is kept up to date with the thoughts of the group. In addition, the Assistant Director Place Environment has been briefing the leadership team on the developments from the working group to ensure that the outcomes from the working group are understood. The findings of the working group are to be brought back to the review committee in March and should recommendations be resolved, will be taken forward to Council in April for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Mr Hoy, do you have a supplementary question which must be linked to your original question or the response given by Councillor Steptoe?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Steptoe, for the full response. Could you, based on your answer, clearly the information is being fed back into the leadership team at all levels. Can you say as leader that you're confident that this information is helping officers and the executive make decisions now, such as on, say, the Freight House, that will mean it will be compliant with whatever the 2030 working group may suggest?
Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Simple answer, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Okay. Members, at 10 o'clock the meeting will have lasted 2.5 hours. That is prescribed for meetings of the Council. We still have a number of items still to get through. It will be good to try and get through all of the remaining business, if at all possible. I move a motion without notice 9N set out on page 4.23 of the Constitution and continue this meeting beyond 2.5 hours. Do I have a seconder? Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Cutmore. Is that agreed, members? Sure. Show of hands. All in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Right. That is agreed, members. In line with Council Procedure Rule 17.3, set out on page 4.15 of the Constitution. Oh, sorry, I've already done that. My apologies. We will continue after 10 o'clock then, members. Councillor Mrs McPherson. I would suggest we review it again at 10:30 to see how we are, okay? Right, I shall take item 7 then, agenda. Where are you? Sorry, item 6 of the agenda. Item 7 of the agenda, business from last council. Members, there are none. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll recall at the last meeting we were concerned about the lack of resident engagement, that the council based its budget on 222 replies out of 80-odd thousand. And the leader advised that he would discuss the issue, and I'm reading from the minutes, of improving public engagement in the budget process with officers and portfolio holders, and would report back to members on this issue. Is he in a position to report back?
Councillor Mr Steptoe, would you like to respond to that?
Chairman, no, not as of yet. We've been concentrating on other matters between times, but I will get a report back to members as soon as
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Councillors, I shall take item 8 on the agenda, minutes of the executive and committee meetings held between the period 4th of December 2019 to the 4th of February 2019. Do you note these, members? Thank you. Agenda item 9, reports from the executive and committees to council. The report to the Standards Committee on the Member Training Working Group. Councillor Mrs McPherson, Chairman of the Standards Committee, will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chairman. I think everybody will be happy if I keep this brief. In December, we had a very robust discussion and debate around the membership of the group. In Mr Hoy's own words, the membership had been somewhat cobbled by the decision made in December 2017. It was actually unanimous as a group of the committee that we amend that. That is there on bullet point 1, 2, 3 under 1.2, and the recommendation is over the page 2.1. Thank you, Chairman.
Do you have a seconder, Councillor Mrs McPherson? Okay. Councillor Mrs Mason? Are you seconding it, Councillor? Yeah, okay, thank you. Then, members, I shall put it... Any questions at all, first of all? No questions? The recommendation then is that the proposed council resolves that the composition of the member training working group be decided and constituted by the Standards Committee starting from the next municipal year onwards. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Can I just ask for some clarification, Mr Chairman, on a point of order? You've said that we can't have counting because for some reason we can't, it's a new rule, but you've said that decisions will be made on a show of hands. Now, we're not even going that far. I'm really at a loss to know how this is being administered. Thank you.
Sorry. Members, I shall go back to that recommendation. All those who agree the recommendation, please indicate by a show of hands.
I think that's unanimous.
It is unanimous. Thank you, members. Right, item 10, members report on urgent business. Members, there are none. Item 11, report on the leader of the workers, the executive. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Just before I give my report, I would just like to pick up on a point that Councillor Stanley made earlier on. I go to great lengths to invite members of all persuasions across the chamber to attend various meetings, budget meetings, working parties, etc. And in actual fact, I did create the situation, and this was agreed at council a little while ago, that members could come along and ask questions at the executive. To date, I've not had anybody come forward for that. So perhaps I can remind members that that facility is now available. Chairman, this is the fourth ordinary council meeting of the 2019-20 municipal year, and I would like to welcome all members. Since the meeting on the 17th of December, the executive has met once, during which considerations included noting the Q3 2019-20 revenue budget and capital position, approving the outline business case for the Connect Cultural and Transformation Programme, and including agreement that that programme be designated as a gold project and the funding of £293,000 be created from the 2019-20 underspend. Agreement to lease the council-owned land to Rayleigh Town Sports and Social Club for the use of their sports ground and social use for a period of 28 years. Agree the disposal of the freehold interest of land at Cagefield Road, Stanbridge. Other matters that my executive colleagues and I have dealt with include agreeing to lease the council-owned asset known as Clements Hall Pavilion to East Essex Hackspace Community Interest Company for a period of 7 years. Agreeing to submit a formal response to the Castle Point Council's 2019 pre-submission local plan consultation within the prescribed time period. As always, Chairman, I will be happy to take any questions from the members in respect to the work of the executive, and I'm sure my executive colleagues will be more than happy to contribute where appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Mr Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully it's a very simple one this time. I note that Councillor Steptoe mentioned about the fact that all councillors now come to the executive and ask questions. I'm aware that he did state that was changing. However, I apologise for missing this, but I didn't see where it came out to us as a change in the constitution or a change by noticing a council. I just haven't seen it. I've read, as you might be aware, that I am a bit of a nerd and I do like reading constitutions, and I can quote from our constitution quite well, and I cannot recall it being changed for this purpose. If it isn't being changed, on what basis are members allowed to go to the executive and ask questions? Do they have to be on notice? Can they be asked at the meeting without notice? Are follow-up questions allowed? Can we have some clarity, please? And point me to where I've missed instructions.
Steptoe, would you like to come back on that?
Chairman, I see our legal officer is quickly looking to see where it is in the Constitution. Perhaps she can advise that. But
Chairman, yes, there has been a change to the Constitution. It's on page 4.52 of the Constitution, questions on notice at executive meetings. It sets out the criteria for members to attend those.
Can I just ask when that was changed, please? Because I can't remember. I can't recall it going through council. Can you confirm when it went through council, please?
22nd of October 2019.
Thank you. Yes. Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to, for the sake of clarity, on the Chairman's first comment about opposition not engaging, make an observation on that I think the administration may not actually have taken into account. One of the things that we are quite keen to do on the opposition benches here, believe it or not, is actually to make a difference. That's why we've stood for election. The fact is that certainly in the short tenure that our leaders had so far, we've had many, many situations where the cooperation has been completely opposite. The first two council meetings that we had, we brought items to the agenda, and the first one was completely farcical because it didn't come from the administration, It was something that was put a different motion in, which was exactly the same as the motion that I put in, but because it didn't come from the administration, it wasn't actually carried through as we put through, and this has happened again and again. This, I hope the administration realise that this is a frustration that we on the opposition benches are feeling more and more, and we are getting it again tonight in some of the things that have been put forward. And I wouldn't mind betting that in some of the motions on notice that have been put forward by members of the opposition tonight, that they don't go through as they've been put through, as they have been put in without an amendment, so as it does give a little bit of a boost to the administration. And I'd just like to acknowledge the fact that we would like to be involved. In fact, I'm involved with 2 working groups. I want to make a difference. That's why I stood for election. But being constantly ignored and put to one side by procedural issues, etc., does get disheartening on occasions. And when we are offered the chance of coming to be part of the discussions or to listen to these discussions, we do begin to get a feeling of, well, why bother?
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. Just following on from what Councillor Reeves has just said, I became a group leader for Lib Dems late last year, taking over from Councillor Stanley, and during that time since, I've not received any communication from the leader himself, and I don't know whether that's because, and I've pointed this out recently, there was an issue with receiving emails from Councillor Steptoe, but I would just, you know, we haven't closed our doors to being involved in anything within this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newport. No other quick? Councillor Mr Hoy.
On a point of order, when this council approves changes of constitution, surely we're allowed to know what the changes actually are. There's no detail in the motion of the 22nd of October to say what the act. It just says it approves the changes, but there are no changes in the minutes at all.
Point of order, Chair.
Sorry.
Chairman, the leader's report is read out by the leader, and the whole purpose of this section is actually to ask direct questions of the leader about that report. Here we are back debating the Constitution. Here we are back debating the role of the minority parties. So I just put that to you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wotton.
Chairman, in response to Councillor Hoy's question, I recall that it was actually a report before Council.
Thank you. Right, members, we'll now take item 12 on the agenda, motions on notice. Members, we have a total of 7 motions on notice. The first motion has been posed by Councillor Webb and seconded by Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Webb, would you please summarise and speak on your motion on notice, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, Holocaust Memorial Day was a recent reminder of the need to remain vigilant against anti-Semitism, both at a national and a local level. Thankfully, within the district, anti-Semitism is currently not a significant issue, with a few examples of offensive graffiti that we have had being dealt with extremely promptly. That said, I would encourage us as a council to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism as a clear message that any anti-Semitic behaviour will not be tolerated. This definition has also been adopted by the government, and a number of other local authorities are now also adopting this definition. The Secretary of State recently wrote to us and asking us to adopt this definition, which I would hope we would endorse. So, further to the Secretary of State's letter of the 15th of October 2019 to Council leaders, this Council is asked to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism as set out below. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I have pleasure in seconding this proposition.
Are there any questions, members? Councillor Mr Hoy.
Thank you. No questions as such, but just I'm very happy to support this motion. I think it's about time this council stood up to some of the anti-Semitism that's been happening in the district, particularly in Rayleigh, which I'm aware of. And I'll fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we have a proposer and a seconder. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That motion is agreed. The second motion has been proposed by Councillor Mrs Mason. Mrs Mason. Councillor Mrs Mason, would you like to summarise and speak on your motion of notice, please?
I think that the motion, in a way, speaks for itself. But what we've heard tonight, on many accounts, actually says why we're doing this. Minority groups in this council, and I don't like the term opposition. We're not opposing. We're trying to work with the team, but we're finding that there's not been possible, not for many reasons. Opposition, oppression, whatever. We're not. We're minority groups, and as Councillor Eaves has said, we want the best interests and the best result for this council. And in doing so, we need to have a voice, and particularly a voice on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is the most important committee of this council. It is the policeman. It checks. It helps. It oversees. As the word says, it overview and scrutiny. So the motion is that this council, having received the observations of the Corporate Peer Challenge and the identified need to strengthen the scrutiny function and the inclusion in the report that the minority political groups do not feel sufficiently engaged, address both these points by altering the Constitution as follows. And to alter the Constitution prior to annual council so that the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Review Committee, be nominated by the minority political groups and independent members only. If no member of the minority political groups accepts a nomination, then and only then will nominations be accepted from any other member. This would not only encourage minority political groups and independent member engagement and facilitate greater scrutiny if minority political groups and independent members felt their views had some impact, rather than the current imposition that their views are being ignored by the majority political group.
I second that, Chairman.
Thank
I
you,
may speak later.
Councillor Hoy. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. The rules around the chairmanship of Review Committee were previously approved by this Council and is set down in the Constitution that it should be a member from the opposition. That's lawful. The motion put forward by Councillor Mrs Mason would be undemocratic in that it excludes the members of my group, and that would be 27 members of this Council, Chairman. Following the peer review feedback report of the Local Government Association, it is recognised that there is a wider piece of work to be carried out with regards to the Council's scrutiny function, which the Monitoring Officer is currently investigating. She will report back in due course as to her findings and actions or recommendations. I note what Councillor Mrs Mason has said about encouraging and engaging minority groups and independent members, but revising the method as to how a chairman is selected does not achieve this. To agree this motion now would preempt any outcome of the wider work which is yet to be completed. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chairman. Since I was elected onto this council in 2014, the issue of how the chairman of the Review Committee has been selected has and remains a major irritation to certain opposition members, who believe that they, and only they, should have the power to elect a member to that position. Such is their continued determination to change the Constitution so that this may become the case, I have personally found myself questioning the motives for such an unnecessary change. For the benefit of everyone here this evening, and for absolute clarity, I am the current chair of the Review Committee, a position I've held since 2016. Until recently, I was the only politically independent councillor elected to this council, and it was felt by the majority of the Conservative members that I was the most suitable to hold that position, bearing in mind my political neutrality. This motion does indeed refer to the recent corporate peer challenge, which contains the sentence, "The council also needs to strengthen the scrutiny function, which members said does not play a positive role in policy development." This is an interesting yet disappointing conclusion. Disappointing because, from what I can deduce, neither myself as chairman, the Overview and Scrutiny Officer, or members of the Conservative group who sit on that committee that I have spoken to so far, none of us were invited to contribute to this review, something I believe was the case when the last review was carried out in 2012. Interestingly, at the same time, because I can therefore only assume that the members who did participate were ironically members of the opposition parties who state that they do not feel sufficiently engaged and whose input has led to a conclusion that I believe has been politically arrived at. This motion suggests to me that those proposing it believe that the ability to solely elect who chairs that committee will somehow strengthen it. That is not the conclusion reached in this report or the report made in 2012, and has not been suggested by those who carried out the review at any time. Interestingly, when the last report was carried out in 2012, when the very same issue regarding the review committee was highlighted, at that time and the immediate subsequent years that followed, the committee was actually chaired by Councillor Mr Hoy, elected by minority party members and who now brings forward this motion to full council. This motion claims that such a change to the Constitution would encourage minority groups and independent member engagement and facilitate greater scrutiny if minority political groups and independent members felt their views had some impact rather than the current impression that their views are being ignored by the majority political group. Members, there will always be a majority political group, more than likely to be Conservative, regardless of who elects who to the position of Chairman of Review. If the minority members believe that they are being ignored, why do those same members believe that by having the sole power to elect to this position, the majority political group will no longer ignore their views, something I don't agree with? In my opinion, we have minority group members who have chosen to isolate themselves and made the often collective decision not to engage with the rest of the council or councillors, who do not volunteer to sit on working groups where their independent strengths and knowledge would be helpful and greatly appreciated, yet choose to cry neglect and exclusion at every given opportunity. I still question the real motives behind this motion, but I do know it's got nothing to do with strengthening the review committee or making minority members feel engaged when they repeatedly choose not to engage with a Conservative-led council. Because of my current position, should this go to a vote, I will be abstaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Wilkinson.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I'm absolutely gobsmacked to what I've just listened to. First things first, I would like to put on record, because there have been several discussions about this, that I do feel engaged, that I have been approached by Councillor Steptoe, and I have been invited to be part of the car park working group. And I think he's done that because I am an independent member and because I'm not part of a political group and I don't get a look in otherwise. Having said that, I am also on other committees because other members have been grateful enough to give me their places, the licensing subcommittee being one of them. So, but I do understand the frustration that is shared by members here, because I did voice it in an email this week to the Managing Director, that I feel as though when we are in, and I understand how democracy works, and it's a phrase I've used this week a couple of times, but when there is one party domination to the point that we have here, is yes, you sit here and listen, I'm sure you do sit here and listen, but with the exception of some members, and there are some, and I do want to acknowledge there are some members of your group who do vote with us, the vast majority don't, and which you're more than entitled to do. So we do feel as though we're not listened to. The two motions that Councillor Hoy makes reference to, his own one and mine, both of those were taken from us. Both of those are now in existence. It's exactly what we wanted, but they've now got the political twist in it, which was unnecessary. And I think that's evidence of it. What I've just heard from Councillor Burton is without words the most unbelievable thing. If I thought what happened in July last year was unreal, what I've just heard from you is even worse. We aren't engaged. You disengage yourself. I've never known anybody on these benches to completely ignore everybody else on these benches. I've tried to engage with you enough times as a ward councillor with you. You ignore me. You know, this is beyond belief. Yeah, I know it's personal. I'm sorry.
Yes. Councillor Wilkinson, address the chair, please, over time.
It was a personal attack on us, and I'm now returning it. Chairman, I will say nothing more than this, that the motion that's been put forward this evening is not for us to choose the chair of the review committee. That is not what it says. We have put forward a motion, or these councillors put forward a motion to nominate. It then goes to full council for that person to be elected. But what we are having is we voted for somebody, we wanted somebody, and each year that person's not getting elected, and the person that the administration are choosing is being elected, and that's the point we're saying. It feels unfair, and there should be open to scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Does anybody else wish to speak on this matter? Councillor Mr Hoy.
Yes, sorry, Chairman, I had indicated I thought you'd noticed me, but obviously not. With regard to dates, which I think I must address, because I think Councillor Burton has mixed them up somehow. When the previous peer review came, I did meet with them, and at that point I was not a member of the review committee. After they left, they increased the size of the review committee, and I became a member once we formed a group of 2 people. I was at that point not a chair. I believe, and I cannot remember for sure, it was either Councillor Mrs Lumley and then certainly subsequently Councillor Mr Lumley, who was chair after the peer review at that time. I only ever chaired the review committee once, and I chaired it for approximately 10 months because I believe Councillor Lumley was in it prior to me, and he had an extended stay because of, I think, of a European election, possibly. So I was only chair for about 10 months. So it's actually quite a short period I was chair of. After that point, at that point when I was chair, I was in some ways very undemocratically, I'd probably agree with this, I was merely chair because we were the largest opposition group, and at that point it went to a member of the largest opposition group, and I'd probably agree that that in itself is probably undemocratic, and I wouldn't argue with changing that. However, the Conservatives at that time decided to change it to any member of the opposition group, which then allowed them to choose the person who would chair the review committee. And that is the problem we have. We wouldn't have any objection to another formulation of it, and I think this is the best formulation we can come up with, which makes it more democratic than it used to be, and certainly more democratic than it currently is. I'm not going to make a personal attack on Councillor Burton. He chairs the committee perfectly finely. I think he's very fair to all members of it, and I wouldn't say he isn't. And I'm very disappointed that he's chosen to attack us personally on the way he has. However, I think this motion takes on board the changes that the Conservatives made to the Constitution prior to when I was on it, and have made their changes much more democratic than they were, and much more democratic than they were when I was first elected to the committee, and that's why I've seconded the motion and will be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. On the subject of the peer review group, I did meet with the peer review team, and it was very interesting. It's the first time I've met with them, and the representative I spoke to was actually a Conservative councillor from elsewhere in the country. He described our review committee as having rubber teeth, his words. And even though I'm not on review, I've taken an active part in a working group from Review Committee, the ICT task group. And I'm very enthusiastic about that. And in fact, I've requested further meetings to discuss that. So I actually feel as if, you know, comments about us not engaging are probably not very fair in a lot of ways. But I do think that policing themselves isn't a good idea, and I think that this change would be a positive step to that.
Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a brief comment, just to say that, as I understand the motion before us, is that the opposition groups and independent members are looking to nominate someone to go before full council. So I can't see that the argument against this as being undemocratic stands, because it then falls for the council to make a decision about that nomination. So there is democracy element in this motion, and I support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hookway. Members, I see no... Sorry, Councillor Mrs Mason. Oh, sorry, by Councillor, yeah. Mrs Macpherson. Councillor Mrs Macpherson. Sorry, Joe.
Thank you, Chairman. Just through yourself, there's been a lot of talk about inclusion and engagement. I was very pleased to hear Councillor Mr Hoy's comments around the Chairman of Scrutiny, or Review I should say, and I would urge anybody who is listening to this conversation to actually go and listen to the audios of the Review Committee. Everyone is included in that meeting. Only recently we had one of the subjects was to do with housing, and it was to do with the leasehold scheme, and one of our councillors here, Councillor Mrs Mason, has a lot of knowledge in that. I think most of us were in awe of her knowledge, and we were listening and taking that on board, and I believe you may be the chair of that working group, is that correct? It is. I object a little bit to the inclusion comments. There are people here to my right who will know that I have personally called them up and asked them to join working groups, come to the budget away days. The late wonderful Councillor Black always used to come to the budget away days, because a good idea is a good idea whoever puts it forward. And what I also take umbrage about with this inclusion is it's quite difficult when you then go home and some of the things that we have done, such as set the budget, is ridiculed on one of the political pages, and yet some of those people haven't even engaged in it. So this is a two-way thing. I call people up, I try to get them to engage, but then us, we're ridiculed, and yet some people haven't taken part in anything to do with it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Yes, thank you. I didn't expect this at all, because this was a motion that was being positive and constructive. I'm surprised that Councillor Burton's taken it personally. It wasn't meant personally. It wasn't meant as a criticism. And as an independent member, Councillor Burton probably isn't aware that a lot of us sit on other committees and do participate in quite a lot of other working groups. But it isn't personal, so it isn't an issue on that. So this isn't a criticism of Councillor Burton, and I'm upset that he's managed to take it that way. What it is a clear, if you like, we're going back to where we were before we had difficulties where the minority groups felt excluded. Now, whether we're right or wrong in feeling excluded, I can't say. But what I do know is that's the feeling, and it's a strong feeling. And this is trying to rectify that feeling, and there's a gross misunderstanding here that you're not going to elect the chair. All we're saying is the nomination, as it used to be, it used to always be, as Councillor Hoy has said, from the largest opposition, if you like, group. and they always used to be, and there was never a problem until that was changed by the administration. Since then, there's been a feeling of disengagement and a lack of empowerment. And I'm not saying this is deliberate, but whether it's deliberate or not, it has happened. And if you want to work with us all, and we want to work with you, that's what we're elected for, and we want to participate, then you need to occasionally listen to us and not take it as personal criticism, not taking it as a criticism against your party. So I am concluding here, and everyone will vote. All I'm altering is the nomination. And can I ask that the motion be put, please, Mr. Chairman? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Mason. Members, I will. You had a seconder, did you, Mrs. Mason?
I second it.
Thank you. Right.
No, the motion be put. We need a second.
It has been seconded.
Not the motion be put.
It was seconded. It was seconded, Terry. Members, I shall now.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm having trouble hearing.
I shall now ask members to vote on the motion. Those in favour, please indicate.
May I have my vote recorded as for, please, Chairman?
Those against? Any abstentions? 1, 2. That motion has failed, members. Thank you very much. Yeah. Members, as promised earlier, it is now coming up to 10:30, and I move without notice 9N set out on page 4.23 of the Constitution and continue this meeting. I would suggest for another half an hour. We do have another 5 motions to visit. Do I have a seconder?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Cutmore. Is that agreed, members? Yeah, those. Can I have a show of hands, please, for those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? That is carried. I shall review the situation again at 11 o'clock, members.
Sorry, Chairman, a point of order. I'm afraid myself and Councillor Mrs. Hoy will have to be excused because we do have a young child at home. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you. No, it wasn't. No.
Could you kindly offer a comfort break? I would quite like one if they're leaving.
Okay, 5 minutes, Councillor Ian Ward. Councillor, another comfort break for 5 minutes, members.
Chairman, I shall be standing for a while. I shan't be disappearing. I shan't necessarily want to speak, but I can't sit anymore.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor House. Members, as time is pressing, can I ask that future questions and responses are brief as possible, please? I shall now take item 1.4 on the agenda of item 12, and that is in the hands of Councillor Mrs. Mason. Sorry, could I ask Councillor Mrs. Mason to open this motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will try and keep it brief. This is just trying to rectify a few years' errors without waiting a few more months. When I'm going to, perhaps I ought to say, can we have a show of hands? Because if everyone's read it, it will save me reading it out. But probably you don't go along with that now. So I'm going to move straight to the motion rather than take time, because I expect this to go the same way as every other motion that we put forward. This motion calls for the monitoring officer to resolve the situation immediately and confirm the correct status of planning policy with any necessary amendments to the Constitution as needed at the next council meeting on the 21st of April. So I can't be much briefer than that. Thank you.
Councillor, do you have a seconder?
Chairman, I second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Mrs Mason has raised her concerns on this matter with officers, and it was looked into fully to understand her concerns and issues raised. Councillor Mrs Mason, thank you for that. The subcommittee was constituted by Annual Council in May 2019 according to the pro rata rules. It makes no decisions on matters reserved to the Council or the Executive and reports directly to the Council on matters that are reserved to Council. The issue is a technical one. It has been confirmed to Mrs Mason, Councillor Mrs Mason, that the Council's monitoring officer will be presenting her annual monitoring officer report to members in April. This issue will be included as part of that report. Therefore, I can support this motion in part, and so I do wish to move an amendment to the motion to say the monitoring officer will ensure that the current planning policy subcommittee will be constituted as a full committee at the next annual council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Councillor Steptoe.
I have pleasure in seconding that, Chairman.
Members, any questions on an amendment, please? No questions? Councillor Mrs Mason.
It's not unhappy with it, but it's just that it is now a committee of full council. So if we could have confirm, or can, I'm quite, from what I heard, I didn't quite get what you read out. Please, yes, thank you. Just the one word I've got concern on.
Thank you, Chairman. The monitoring officer will ensure that the current planning policy subcommittee will be constituted as a full committee at the next annual council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe.
I'm not surprised at that, but I'll tell you why I'm concerned. I was told last year that there was nothing wrong with it. We've been told year after year, and it took a lot of persuasion to get officers to look into it. It was only this October, and this is where the concern comes in. This October it was confirmed that it was inaccurate. I accept for the sake of a month, I'm not, but one thing I will correct you on, we weren't advised that the monitoring officer's report would be out in April. We were advised it would be out, but not exactly when. So, yeah, I'm quite happy for that to go through. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we have an amended motion proposed by Councillor Rowe and seconded by Councillor Steptoe. Those in favour, please indicate. That's unanimous, members. Thank you. Right. We now go on to the motion again by Mrs Mason. If I could ask Mrs Mason once again to present her motion, please. It's a fourth motion.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. If I was less tired, I would summarise it, but I can't, and I think this is actually too important to gloss over as the previous motion I was able to. This scheme, I have put the background down. The BA Hope Foundation was set up in 2018 to continue the legacy of a paramedic, I believe, called Billy Apathany Hope, which I've probably pronounced wrong. A 20-year-old ambulance driver from Bristol who was the inspiration and idea behind the Billy chip, which is basically like a poker chip. I will brief it for some of it because I'm hoping that people have read this. It turns out that most people are apprehensive about giving money directly to homeless people, because it's not possible to know how that donation is spent. Unfortunately, the common perception, rightly or wrongly, is that the money will be used for alcohol, drugs or cigarettes. Even if a donation of food or drink is given to safeguard your donation, it is very awkward as people have to make assumptions of what the person wants and when they want it. The alternative is to engage with that person, ask the question and then purchase what's required, which many residents, quite understandably, feel uncomfortable doing. Billy recognised that the likelihood of someone having the time, the inclination and the courage and kindness to engage with a homeless person to buy them food or drink was a big challenge. And he thought up this concept of a Billy chip. The Billy chip is a token that can be purchased by a £2 donation via a retail outlet, which supplies takeaway beverages like tea and coffee. The purchaser receives the Billy chip, which can be given to any homeless person instead of money. The homeless person can redeem the Billy chip for at any participating outlet, and hopefully, this can be extended. Each time a donation for the Billy chip is received, some of your money goes towards supporting the foundation, some to carry on working with homeless people. A portion of the donation goes to the retailer to cover their costs and the costs of supporting the foundation's function. So they're not actually giving them £2. There is an administrative cost that's built in. The brilliant and unique way the Billy chip scheme works allows people to donate to the homeless without the worry of their donation being spent in an inappropriate manner. It also encourages retail outlets to do their bit for corporate social responsibility. The Billy chip has received national publicity for the way it supports homeless and local businesses. It provides a degree of security to the giver by removing uncertainty about the use that their donation may be put to. It also alleviates the risk of people receiving donations being able to use those contributions for dependency issues. Although Rochford District does not have as many homeless people as some nearby areas, the fact that the problem is a relatively small one should not prevent this council in being proactive in assisting people in need. They're still our residents. The scheme sought to provide tea and coffee, but there's no reason why outlets could not extend this to food and soft drinks, and various value chips can be made available. They're blue at the moment. Every blue token has Billy's smiling face on it, along with the message, "You're fabulous and don't ever forget it." And I think our residents are fabulous, and I think we ought to help them in any way we can. Having contacted the organisation, they are willing to support Rochford District Council in extending this scheme to our area. As the scheme is already up and running, any costs involved should be minimal, as a £2 token covers retailers' expenses. This motion directs that officers investigate the scheme as a matter of urgency with the view to implementation, until I'm tired, through Council before the end of April 2020. It's urgent. Homeless people don't suddenly get housed. They're thirsty, tired and hungry all the time. The simplicity and speed of using an existing scheme to assist our homeless population. So I'm asking the Council to note that this Council resolves to undertake the necessary steps to ensure that Rochford District is included in the scheme, promote the scheme with local traders, and look to extend the scheme to cover food and different value tokens. I'm quite happy if members have read this and have picked up anything that I've missed. I'm happy to make an amendment to my motion. But I do think it's a very important one, and I do think it's not something that we should delay. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Mason, do you have a seconder? Councillor Eaves, yes, thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chairman.
for
I would like to thank members of Rochford District residents for bringing this motion forward and recognise the good intent behind it. Although we recognise that the current estimated number of visible rough sleepers is low in comparison to some other Essex authorities, our housing option team do continue to manage an average of over 300 approaches a month and are providing advice, support and intervention work. As you may know, we have recently started a partnership with Chess, the homeless charity based in Chelmsford, who we have partnered with locally to support rough sleepers in the district. As part of this rough sleeper initiative, we are working with 4 other neighbouring authorities and Essex County Council, and as a group we have been successful in bidding to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and recently awarded together nearly just over £400,000 between the local authorities, and that's for government funding to support those that are most vulnerable in our society. We have spoken with Chess about this scheme, and they have suggested that other schemes are also available, for example the Greater Change scheme. As we partner with Chess and 4 other neighbouring authorities as part of our new rough sleeper initiative, we should be aimed to be consistent in our approaches. As part of exploring this scheme and those like it, I would like to ask officers to add this idea as a topic of discussion for the rough sleeper initiative steering group, to see what others think about introducing it, not just in this area, but in the other local authority areas as well. Therefore, I would like to amend the motion to say in part 4, this motion directs officers to investigate and explore this scheme and other similar schemes with a view to reporting back to Council before the end of June 2020. This Council notes the simplicity and speed of using an existing scheme to assist our homeless population. This Council resolves to undertake the necessary steps to ensure that Rochford District investigates this scheme and others like it, and then to promote the scheme with local traders and to look to extend this scheme to cover food and different value tokens. So I've just changed a few words there. I have got copies of that proposed motion, the amendment, if you'd like to have a quick look.
Okay, let us look at it first.
Thank you. I'm happy to do that, yes.
Councillor Mrs Mason.
Yeah, if you could just, I'll just read through this and I will amend my motion as the first sentence stays the same. Can I ask a question, please, Councillor Webb? You put promote the scheme. Presumably you mean the chosen scheme. Promote the scheme?
I understand there's a number of different schemes. I understand there's a number of different schemes out there.
Sorry, through the chair.
Sorry, through the chair.
Yes, I understand that. Your first one, undertake the necessary steps to ensure that Rochford District Council investigates this scheme and others like it. But then you put promote the scheme. Promote a scheme or?
Yeah, promote a scheme.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr Chairman, but obviously we want to get this correct. Look to extend the scheme to cover food and different value tokens. I'm quite happy to move that motion, and I'll read it out again for clarity. That this council notes the simplicity and speed of using an existing scheme to assist our homeless population. This council resolves to undertake the necessary steps to ensure that Rochford District Council investigates this scheme and others like it. This council resolves to promote a scheme with local traders, looks to extend the scheme to cover food and different value tokens. And I believe, Councillor Webb, through the chair, if I may, you put a date on that?
I felt June was a suitable timescale just because officers have got obviously
yes,
other
as
work.
we've extended it to other schemes.
Yes.
I'm quite happy. The report to be to full council. Where do you want it reported to? Full council? I think it should come to the full council.
I'd be happy for full council.
Yeah. And so the final part of the motion is the report to come to full council by June 20.
Do you have a seconder for those amendments, Mrs Mason? Councillor Reeves, thank you. Any questions on those amendments, members? No?
It was a revised motion, Mr Chairman.
Yeah, revised revisional motion. Councillor Webb, are you happy with those revised?
I'm happy with those amendments. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes. I shall put that to the vote then, members. If those in favour, please indicate. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's carried. Thank you very much. Right. Members, the fifth motion has been moved by Councillor Cannell. Councillor Cannell, can you please present your motion?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. I stand with more optimism than some of my colleagues here this evening. I hope this is a motion that we can all agree to. For context, before I start, there aren't that many accurate recordings of figures of EU nationals in our district. However, the 2011 census estimates around 1,100, and the 2019 annual population survey predicts around 4,000. The government have so far released figures that suggest 336 applications have been received from this district. With that context in mind, I therefore read the motion as it has been shared with you. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland left the European Union at 2300 hours on January 31st, 2020. In July 2017, the then Prime Minister announced the outline for an EU settled status scheme that would enable EU nationals the right to continue living, working and studying in the UK after we leave. In January 2019, the same Prime Minister announced that following a pilot, the EU settlement scheme, as it had become formally known, was to launch in March of that year, and that a 65 fee that was charged in the pilot would be removed. The current Prime Minister has continued this scheme and has used Prime Minister's questions as recently as January 2020 to vocalise his support for it. The scheme outlines two forms of status: settled status for those that have lived in the UK for 5 years or more, and means they can reside in the UK forever without reapplying unless they leave the UK for a period of 5 consecutive years. Pre-settled status for those citizens who started living in the UK by the 31st of December 2020 but will have not had 5 years continuous residence at this point. It will allow people to reside in the UK for 5 years, at which point they can apply for settled status. This council notes the invaluable contribution of EU citizens living and or working in Rochford District to the local economy and public service provision. The council therefore resolves to advertise the government's EU settlement scheme and support any resident with their application for settled status or pre-settled status as described under it. Support any resident who applied for the EU settlement scheme before March 2019 to receive a refund of their £65 fee. Confirm that it believes that all EU citizens in the district should retain their right to vote and be candidates in local elections, and pledge to support and protect all EU citizens who live or work in the district throughout the transition period. Thank you.
Councillor Cannell, do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Newport, thank you. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I will try and rattle through this as quick as I can. I do have some copies of the words, so I'll pass these out whilst I'm speaking.
Yes, thank you.
Pass those out for me, please. It does say on the top of the sheet there, motion 5, but it's actually 1.6, so please ignore that. Councillor Cannell is correct that following the UK's departure from the EU, except in a few cases, who are now those who are EU, EEA or Swiss citizens and their families can apply for the EU settlement scheme to continue living in the UK after the 13th of June 2021. The EU settlement scheme is administered by the government via gov.uk website. Councillor Cannell asks the Council to note the invaluable contribution EU citizens living and or working in Rochford District to the local economy and public service provision, and I'm sure all members will agree with that. But Councillor Cannell goes further in that he asks the Council to make resolutions regarding the EU settlement scheme, some of which I cannot accept in the form in which it is proposed. I have circulated to all members a copy of the amendment to the motion, which I shall move at the conclusion of this speech. Councillor Cornell proposes that the Council resolve to advertise the Government EU settlement scheme and support any resident with their application for settled status or pre-settled status under the scheme. With regard to the advertisement of EU settlement scheme, this Council already does and will continue to follow all government requirements to communicate and promote the scheme, and I'm happy to support this element of the motion. Councillor Cornell also asks to resolve to support any resident with their application for settled status or pre-settled status under the scheme. As a local authority, we are a major provider of information affecting people's everyday lives, and we often are the first point of contact for a diverse range of people on many important issues. We also have responsibility to for some vulnerable groups. This Council will support vulnerable or at-risk EU citizens who are residents of this district by raising awareness and providing information, as well as signposting them to the appropriate support services to meet their needs using the toolkit provided by the government on gov.uk. We also work with grant-funded organisations in our area to expose how we can work together to support EU citizens. I believe this type of support is invaluable and is the sort of support this Council can and should provide. But I want to be clear that this support stops short of actually completing applications on behalf of EU citizens or assisting them to complete applications, as this is something I believe should be undertaken by those organisations who are appropriately qualified, and details of those organisations can be found on gov.uk. That is the reason behind my proposal, That is the reason behind my proposed amendment to that part of Councillor Cornell's motion. Councillor Cornell also proposes that the Council resolve to support any resident who applies for EU settlement scheme before March 2019 to receive a refund of any fee that they may have paid. The process for receiving refunds is set out on gov.uk, and this is personal to the applicant, who must show that they are eligible. It would not therefore be appropriate for this Council to interfere with that process, although I agree that we do have a role in signposting applicants to the gov.uk process. This is the reason for my proposed amendment to that part of Councillor Cornell's motion. Councillor Cornell proposes that this Council confirms that it believes that all EU citizens in the district should retain their right to vote and be candidates in local elections. This is clearly a political point, and he will not be surprised that I cannot agree to support that element of the motion. The law is clear about who is or who is not eligible to vote or be a candidate. The Council will always follow the requirements of the law. Finally, Councillor Cornell proposes that this Council pledges to protect all EU citizens who live, work in the district through the transformation period. This is a political point, and whilst I agree in the sentiment behind the motion, I cannot agree with the wording of it, and that is why I propose my amendment. This Council will administer the law of the land, comply with the requirements and communications from government relating to EU exit, and working with partners will signpost EU citizens within the district to all the relevant information that they need throughout their transition period. Accordingly, members, I now move the amendments to the motion set out on the paper in front of you. Chair, for information, I will read it out. My amended proposal is that this council notes the invaluable contribution EU citizens living and or working in the Rochford district to the local economy and public service provision. This council therefore resolves to advertise the EU settlement scheme and working with partners to provide support to any vulnerable at-risk EU citizen, resident, by raising awareness and providing information as well as signposting them to the appropriate support services to meet their needs. Provide any information to any resident who applied to the EU settlement scheme before March 2019 on how to receive a refund. Work with partners to provide support to EU citizens who live or work in the district throughout the transition period. Chairman, I so move that proposal, that amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Do you have a second?
Could I have a copy for the chairman, please?
Councillor Ionu, you'll second that? Thank you very much. Any questions on that amended proposed motion? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. Chair, I understand the basis behind, well, I think the basis behind the amendment. I've just got one question to ask, if I may. In the first bullet point for the amendment, it says, as well as signposting them to the appropriate support services to meet their needs. Now, I must confess that prior to reading this on the agenda for this evening, I hadn't even heard of this scheme, if I'm honest. So do those support services exist that we can signpost them to? I do understand the need to try and push them to the right people, but do they exist? Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Connell.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for Councillor Steptoe for taking so much time to read the motion, think about it, and go through and think about potential changes. I do think some of the examples and reasoning you have given are examples of the type of support I was proposing or intending to propose when I put this forward. However, I can appreciate that written word can be interpreted in different ways. So I don't have too much issue with most of the changes. I do, however, notice that the third bullet point of the original motion confirmed that it believes all UK citizens in the district should retain their right to vote and be candidates in local elections. Again, I can appreciate the written word and interpretation may have led you to that conclusion, but it wasn't intended as a political point. This was intended as a point of showing that they are still our equal, they are still our friends, they are still people we value, and things like being able to vote and stand as candidates would confirm that they are their equal. I'm also not proposing that we change the law with such a bullet point. It was simply confirming that we believe that they should retain, i.e. send them a message that they are equal and that we respect them and that we still want them here. For those reasons, in fact, I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the proposed amended motion, members? No? And I shall put that to the vote. Those in favour, please indicate. Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's been approved. Thank you. Members, it is now 11 o'clock. Where is those wordings? Yeah. And I move without notice 9N set out on page 4.23 of the Constitution continue this meeting beyond 11 o'clock. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ian Ward. Is that agreed, members? There are two more to come.
More to come.
Yeah. Is that agreed? Okay. Okay. The vote is whether to extend or not. Yes, so
Chair, can we just...
if we don't extend, we'll finish the meeting now. So,
Chair, point of order. Myself and Councillor Cannell, we're quite happy to defer our motions to the next council meeting, if that helps.
thank you very much indeed for that. All right. In that case, members, I propose from the chair that we close the meeting at this moment and the two other motions be put to the next meeting. Thank you very much. I close the meeting at 11:02. Thank you very much. I'll do. Thank you, Terry. Well, it wasn't that good.
Please stand for the chairman. Do that. He just got up and went.